Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. What's up, what's up, what's up? Hopefully you guys are okay there in the chat. Let's have a look who we got in here. We got Shurge. He says, big up Hatman. About to keep the brothers entertained during the late night Ramadan leg session. All right. Big up. We got Arco in the chat. He says, bro, I haven't even had a chance to watch the live from earlier yet. Smashing these lives. Yes. We got Kyle. We got Hyro Protagonist Wagwan. Mr. Luca, of course. Merzo Man, big up. S.A. Warlock Boxing. KS, big up. Copend. He says, is Bacoli versus FA still on this card? We'll come on to that. Deb Yaka. What's up, big up. Kyle. Yes, S.A. indeed. Hit the like. So, let's talk about this Fatal Fury City of Wolves card. Before we get on to the actual fights, the concept first, because it's a very interesting concept. So for those of you who don't know, they're going to do this fight in Times Square, right? Now, Times Square is obviously an extremely busy part of New York City, one of the busiest parts. And they're going to do it, as I understand it, on a Friday night. There will be seating for some of the spectators. And Turki Al-Sheikh said it's going to be like 600 people that will get seats, and there'll be VIPs and what have you. But this show will basically be open to the public. The public won't get to sit in the seats around the ring, but they will get to watch from whatever vantage point they have. I don't know whether there'll be barriers that they'll struggle to look over or whatever the case may be. I couldn't imagine there would be, because again, the whole point here is for the public to be able to, get a look into this fight and this fight card. That's part of the whole concept of the promotion, is to make it accessible to the public. So it's something that people haven't seen before, I think it's a very intelligent, very interesting concept to have something like this going on, particularly with these three fighters. Now, Teofimo Lopez, of course, is from New York City. The other two are not, but still, they're all very well known in the United States, particularly Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, and Teofimo Lopez, also well known, but not as famous perhaps as Garcia is, but still they've got their followings. And for the promotion of Riyadh season, this is fantastic, right? For them. There's also talk about doing a show at the famous Alcatraz prison, right? So they've got all sorts of ideas, Riyadh season, and this is one of their more inspired ones. The office workers perhaps in the surrounding buildings and whatnot will be able to look down and watch this fight, assuming there's no kind of canopy. There might be a canopy actually over the ring, because, New York City in March, there's definitely the possibility of rain. Nevertheless, yeah, very interesting concept, very exciting. They're trying something new to bring boxing back into the mainstream consciousness, because in America in particular, boxing over the past few decades has descended into a niche sport. It's not mainstream anymore, unfortunately. In the UK, it's mainstream. And in some other countries in the world, Mexico, of course, it would be mainstream. But in the United States, no, it's a niche sport now. And we can point fingers at people like Floyd Mayweather and others who are largely responsible for that. But this will hopefully help bring boxing back into the mainstream consciousness in America. It's not like going to fix it all overnight, but maybe it will help slightly. And as I say, Turki Al-Sheikh has plans to do many other promotions like this. So, and again, as I said in a previous live stream, it's not like Turki Al-Sheikh's motives are purely altruistic and purely for the good of boxing. No, they have their own agenda. But in some instances, their agenda is going to line up with what's best for boxing. Okay, and to some extent, they're going to have to do what's best for boxing in order to get people to buy into the Riyadh season brand. And they're spending a lot of money and putting good fights on. So let's have a look at the actual card itself. So on here, we've got Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez. And Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza Jr. Now, somebody asked a few moments ago if Martin Bakole versus F.A. Jagba is still on this card. As far as I'm aware, it's not. I'm not sure why Martin Bakole versus F.A. Jagba would happen now. At least not next. I don't understand why it would happen next, because Jagba was set to fight Bakole in an IBF final eliminator. We now know, it's been confirmed, that because Bakole lost to Joseph Parker, he no longer is eligible to fight in that final eliminator. So surely Jagba will fight the next highest ranked available contender in an eliminator instead. Why would he fight Bakole if it's not an eliminator? It doesn't make sense to fight Bakole. So unless he's been offered an enormous amount of money by the Saudis and is willing to forfeit his IBF elimination opportunity. I'm not sure why he would do that. Again, yeah, you might get money, but isn't the opportunity better than the money? Because if you become IBF mandatory, then you're going to get a shot at either Daniel Dubois or Alexander Usyk for, if not bigger money, then the opportunity to make bigger money, then you'll be paid fighting Martin Bakole. So, yeah, as far as I'm aware, the fight is no longer on this particular show. But let's have a look at the matchups anyway that are on there, confirmed for there at the moment. So Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. Now, Rolly Romero is, how can I even describe him? A fun character. Even Ryan Garcia is kind of a fun character. A controversial character, of course, but seen as fun. Both guys are seen as kind of a bit silly, a bit troubled. You know, particularly Ryan Garcia. Well, Ryan Garcia more troubled. Rolly Romero more silly. And, you know, he kind of gained that reputation over the past few years, Romero, in his fights with the likes of Tank Davis, Pitbull Cruz, and so on. He's coming off a win, at least, in this instance. And Ryan Garcia, of course, coming off the Devin Haney fight, which had the original result overturned to a no decision in wake of Garcia failing a PED test. And he served the ban, of course. His ban, I think, should be up now, or it's just about to be up. So he's back in action against Rolly Romero. Romero, as limited as he is, and as foolish as he is, he's always been able to punch. I would expect Ryan Garcia to win this fight, but when you've got a puncher like Romero, you can never count him out completely. And he actually had a decent amount of success in that fight against Tank Davis. So what do you guys think of this one? Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. Does Rolly have a chance here? Or is he going to get blasted out relatively early? What do you guys think? Okay, somebody's saying, I saw that Bakole and FA are still on. Going to be on the Canelo card. Just came out today or yesterday. All right, I'll have a look into that. But I'm not sure why Jagba would still take the fight, because it's been confirmed that it's no longer an IBF final eliminator. Even Billy Nelson confirmed that. So I'm not sure why Jagba would take it. Surely he would fight somebody else in the final eliminator instead. Seagar says Garcia KO mid-rounds. KS says Ryan late stoppage. Yeah, I reckon that sounds about right. Sounds about right to me. So if we have a look at the other fights then. We've got Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez. I think this is an interesting fight. Ramirez may be not at the peak of his powers anymore, and he's coming off that loss to Arnold Barboza. He obviously lost to Josh Taylor earlier on in his career. Taylor went on to become undisputed. In fact, was that the undisputed fight when Taylor fought Barboza? It may have been. But anyway, it was certainly a unification at the time, which Barboza lost. Ramirez lost. Yeah, Ramirez-Taylor was some kind of unification. Ramirez lost that, and then he lost to Arnold Barboza in his last fight. Barboza, is on a bit of a run. He goes up against Devin Haney, who's coming off that weird fight with Ryan Garcia. I say weird fight because it was originally a loss, but then he got overturned because Garcia failed a PED test. So Devin Haney is still officially unbeaten, but most people look at him like damaged goods. You know, it is what it is. So will he have any problems with Jose Ramirez? What do you guys think? Is this a straightforward win for Devin Haney, who's been out the ring a long time? It was, again, nearly a year since he fought Ryan Garcia. And it will be over a year by the time this fight rolls around. Will he have any problems with Jose Ramirez at all? Or will he get the job done? What do you guys think? Seagat says, Haney decision. Gotta be the easy bet. Okay, Chris says, anybody think this being free is extremely dangerous? I have a feeling something will happen in the crowd. NYC is crazy nowadays. Do you live in NYC, Chris V? Because the media will always make out as though things are worse than ever, even when they're not. New York back in the 1990s was far, far, far more dangerous than it is now. Many, many, many times more dangerous. The New York today is not the New York of the early 1990s. Chris V says, I do, it's complete chaos. Okay, well, not sure how old you are, but I'm sure if you talk to the older heads in the 40s and 50s, they'll tell you that the 1980s and 90s are far worse in New York City than they are today. Today is mild in New York compared to how it was, mild and calm compared to how it was in the 90s and the 80s. But it's all relative, right? And of course, in Times Square, back in the 80s, it was quite dangerous in Times Square. It was a seedy area around there back then. But now it's full of tourists and so on and so forth. Could something crazy happen? Well, something crazy could something crazy could happen anywhere, but presumably there's going to be a lot of security around there. I'm sure the Saudis will leave no stone unturned on that front, and they'll be working, of course, closely with, the local government there, the mayor's office, and so on and so forth. So I don't anticipate anything crazy happening personally. Shout out to CPB. He says, hypothetical scenario, but if the Saudis could convince sanctioning bodies to allow the Bivol Beterbiev trilogy, would you be in favor of a David Benavidez-Callum Smith fight? Personally, I would prefer Bivol to fight Benavidez. I don't like this idea of 3 consecutive fights, personally. I think it needs to be broken up by some other fights in between, or else things start to get a bit stagnant. So, yeah, I'd like to see Bivol versus Benavidez first, and then the winner of that can fight Artur Beterbiev. And if the 175-pound division was more lively than it is, then I would advocate having several fights between now and if there ever is a Bivol Beterbiev rematch. But because the light heavyweight division is pretty weak these days, you've got the 2 elite fighters in Beterbiev, Bivol, possibly Benavidez. But outside of that, there's not really much going on. Yeah, Callum Smith had a good win over Joshua Buatsi, but look what Beterbiev did to Callum Smith. So there's not really much going on at 175. Therefore, get Benavidez in there against Bivol, and then the winner of that fights Beterbiev. That's what I say. Seagot says, Turkey is there, so there will be top-tier security. Yeah, I would imagine so. The best of the best. Kylie says, if you've ever seen the film The Taxi Driver, that's what New York was like in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, and in the mid to late 80s, I want to say the mid 80s to the early 90s is when New York City got completely out of control. Absolutely insane. In the mid 80s to early 90s, that may be the most violent New York City has ever been. I mean, they had in the year 1990, you guys can look this up, they had 2,500 murders that year. In the year 1990 in New York City, not New York State, just the city, 2,500 murders in 1 year. That's crazy. typically these days, New York might have 500 murders a year, there or thereabouts. So it's not even remotely close to how dangerous it was in the late 80s, early 90s. It's been marketed in America as America's safest big city. And I think probably for the most part it is. King says probably in Brooklyn. I'm not sure what that comment is in relation to. But New York City back then was dangerous in so many areas. You know, it certainly wasn't just Brooklyn. It was all over the place. Even, as I say, Times Square was a seedy area back in the 80s. It wasn't like it is now. And so many areas which have since been gentrified were dangerous back in the 80s and 90s. You know, Red Hook was extremely dangerous down there. All throughout Brooklyn, Queens. Harlem, of course, was way more dangerous back in the 80s and 90s than it is today. Harlem is largely gentrified now. I know in East Harlem, there's still some kind of rough areas. But the whole of Harlem back then was very, very dangerous. And of course, the mob was still going strong and they were laying people down all over the place in the 1980s. So yeah, it was crazy back then. Chris says there's footage of all the fighters on top of a building across Times Square. I think the ring will be up top on there. They did promo last night. Okay. So you think it's going to be on top of a building and it won't be actually down in the middle of Times Square? I'd be surprised if they did it like that, but I don't know. Maybe you're right. We will see. I suspect they'll do it actually in Times Square itself. They'll lock off the roads. Because this is what I've been hearing. I think this is even what Eddie Hearn was saying. And he's actually part of this promotion, even though he doesn't have any fights on this promotion. He's part of this promotion. So, yeah. They're going to lock off the roads and do it actually on the ground. I think it will be a novel event and very interesting. S says, I guess he's talking about New York City back in the days, especially since the killers could get away with it most of the time and continue to commit crimes. Yeah, back in the 80s and early 90s, New York City was crazy. People getting away with all sorts of stuff, all kind of depraved killers running around and all that. Mad. Chin says, pretty sure 2001 had the most murders in NYC. I'm 100% sure. Well, 2001 would have, yeah, okay, so I see what you're saying. That included 9/11. But if you take 9/11 out of it, you know, that is not the highest number of murders in NYC history. But 2001 for that one incident, yeah. But in a normal year, without some crazy incident like that, no, it was maybe 1990, might have been the highest number of murders ever recorded in New York City. Was about 2,500. Crazy. And that was from, you know, just stuff in the street, random attacks, gang stuff, mob stuff, all sorts of stuff. King says, is there any decent boxers from North Korea? Well, it's a hardcore communist country, so I don't think they're even allowed to have pro boxing, are they? That's how most proper communist countries are. They don't allow professional sports. So presumably it's like that there. Anyway, let's move on to the final fight so far in this card, which is Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza. Now, somebody in the chat said that they expect Teofimo Lopez to stop Barboza. Now, we've seen Teo have issues with slick southpaws in the past. We all remember when he fought Sandor Martin. And more recently, what's the guy's name now? I'm forgetting it. Just get his box rec up here. Yeah, Jermaine Ortiz, he had issues with him as well. He's a switch hitter. So whenever he's in there against slick southpaws, he struggles. Well, he certainly has a couple of times. He didn't struggle against Vasyl Lomachenko, but again, Lomachenko I wouldn't really say is a slick southpaw. He's more of an aggressive southpaw. He's obviously got great footwork and great hands, but he's not a guy that tries to stick and move and out-slick you, is he? So Lopez handled him, and he also handled Josh Taylor, who again is not a slick southpaw. He's an aggressive southpaw who's going to come at you. But when he's in there against someone slick like a Martin or a Jermaine Ortiz, yeah, Lopez has struggled. Let's be real. Now, Arnold Barboza is slick as well, but he's not a southpaw. So maybe the angles line up a little bit better for Teofimo Lopez, where he'll be able to get to Barboza. I guess that's what the person in the live chat thinks will happen. But what say you guys? What say the rest of you? How does Teofimo Lopez fare against Arnold Barboza? Barboza coming off that very good win last time out against Jack Catterall. He got an SD split decision in the UK, which, not the easiest thing to do all the time. Anyone want to chime in on Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza? How do you guys see this one going? Chris V says, I think Teo outclasses Arnold in a snooze fest. It's a horrible mismatch. Really? Okay. Because personally, I think Jack Catterall would have given Teofimo Lopez a lot of problems. We've seen fighters similar to Catterall give him issues. And yeah, I think Catterall would have given him a lot of problems. Obviously, styles make fights. Just because Catterall may, in my opinion, have given Teo lots of issues, doesn't necessarily mean that Barboza will. But I suspect it will be a competitive fight. I don't think it's going to be one-sided at all. Barboza is not really a puncher, of course, but he's a good boxer. He's got a good boxing brain. He's not athletic like Teofimo Lopez, but he knows how to make things awkward for you. Jimbo Jones says, every Saudi card has an upset, and this is that fight. All right, somebody predicting a Barboza win. CPB says, I feel like with Teo, it depends on his frame of mind. He's his own worst enemy, in my opinion. Kylie says, probably Teo over 12. He blows hot and cold, though. If he's on form, he's magic. Chris V says, I think Arnold's pace management is his issue. He fights in one gear all night long. He loves to keep it slow and steady all night. He arguably lost 2 of his last 3 fights. Okay. Interesting take, but I hear you about him being one-paced. As I say, he's not athletic like Teo, who's an explosive fighter. But sometimes these guys like Barboza, who don't look spectacular, when you're in the ring with them, it's a different story. They have a way of hypnotizing you. So some fighters are like that. They really look quite ordinary from the outside looking in. But the fighters who actually face them are surprised by how good they are. Maybe Barboza is one of those guys. Vincent says Teo is a styles fighter. With the right opponent, he shines. S says Teo was the type to either school Barboza and finish him or stink the whole place out in a boring fight. Okay, Millipack says, I think Teo gets him out of there mid to late rounds. Jimbo Jones says, Teofimo's power has been unimpressive at 140 as well. I think that's a fair point. He's been at 140 for a while now, and he hasn't shown the kind of pop that he did at lightweight. So, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think he's still got power, but, I mean, even in, for example, when he fought Josh Taylor, I think Josh Taylor was really feeling the weight of Teo's shots. But maybe Teo's feeling the weight of his opponent's shots at 140, and that's why he doesn't perhaps open up as much as he used to. Feed Khabib, big up. He says, Teo's fighting skills seem bipolar just like his personality. All right. So, yeah, that is City of Wolves. Fatal Fury, named after the video game. I think it's an interesting concept what they're doing. I like it. I think it's innovative. It's giving boxing a different look. And I look forward to the Alcatraz one as well, if they manage to do that. And I've got no reason to doubt them right now. So, yeah, that's Fatal Fury. And somebody mentioned one of my tracks earlier on. My old mixtape tracks, and I probably recorded maybe 100 or more tracks over the years. And these are from well over a decade ago, most of them. Or, yeah. God, some of these, I'm so old these days, it's crazy. Well over a decade. So anyway, check out this Rumble channel. It's called The Bottomless Drink. Some of my old mixtape tracks have been uploaded to this channel. And to give you some recommendations right off the bat, because there's, how many? 5 at the moment. The most popular ones where people say I'm really cooking and the bars are crazy, the flow's crazy. Definitely check out Wounded in Action. A lot of people like that one. That was uploaded 2 days ago, or 2 or 3 days ago now. So Wounded in Action on the Rumble channel, The Bottomless Drink. In fact, let me put that in the description here. I don't think it's actually added to the description. So let me just put it in there real quick. So you guys can just click the link and not have to mess about. Just add this in. Okay, no, it's already in the description. My bad. Yes, if you just go into the description of this live stream, you'll see the link in there for the Rumble channel. And as I say, people are really feeling Wounded in Action. They're saying they like the flow on that one. Also, Moses is a favorite for anyone who's heard a lot of my old tracks. A lot of people like Moses. Personally, I like Chat That Ish as well. I'm going in on the flow and the bars and the metaphors and all that on that one. And the most recent one that was uploaded is Brixton 98. That was recorded back in 2009. And people might be confused. Why is it called Brixton 98 when it was recorded back in 2009? Well, because I was at the time talking about how Brixton was. I was giving like a slice of the street life in Brixton back in 1998 when it was crazy back then. So yeah, that's what that's about. So check out the Rumble channel, The Bottomless Drink. It's got several of my old mixtape tracks on there that people are really rating highly. So yeah, there's that. KB says, yeah, Moses was fire. But anyway, back to boxing. If there's anything else you guys want to talk about, we can get into it, no problem whatsoever. Whether it's this Fatal Fury card, we're going to talk more about Dillian Whyte, proving, showing the receipts that he is actually injured. He's got a very random but bad finger injury. When I first heard it, because somebody in my Element group said that Dillian Whyte's got a badly injured finger. I was like, that sounds like the most spurious reason for somebody pulling out of a fight. Have you got a picture? And then I went on to TalkSport's YouTube channel and saw Dillian Whyte quick to dispel rumors or speculation that he pulled out for a different reason. And they showed a photo, which I'm going to assume was actually Dillian Whyte's hand, and he hasn't Googled it or whatever, because you don't see Dillian Whyte in the photo, you just see a hand, right? Dillian Whyte appeared on camera with a dressing on his finger. So again, unless there's something really cynical going on, then I'm going to assume that that was Dillian Whyte's hand and that was actually his injury. And therefore, he quite rightly is pulled out, because you can't go ahead with a finger that was cut that badly. And he apparently cut it when he was doing some weights on some type of weights bench or whatever, and someone's weight came rolling towards him, and he put his hand out to stop it, but I guess the momentum of this weight caught his finger in between the weight that was rolling and one of the weights that he had by his bench. And I guess it was heavy enough to cause that terrible damage. Again, it's such a random injury. It's so random. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before in boxing, where a guy had to pull out of a fight with something like that. A fault line says, sounds a bit like Connor's injured baby toe at first. Wasn't that David Hay? Or did Connor Ben also have an injured toe? CPB says Whyte will fight Chisora next. I think that's really the fight for them, you know? That's really the fight for them. For both of them. I don't think either of them should go in any other direction. Fight each other. Okay, Faultline says, no, I mean Conor McGregor. Oh, okay. Yes, Charles B in the chat. Always good to see you. Big up Charles B. Ayed says, Paulie sounded really disappointed about Dana coming to boxing. Well, I think he's had some choice words for Dana in the past, hasn't he? And yeah, I've got some reservations, to say the least, about Dana White getting involved in boxing because, again, he doesn't have a good history with the way he treats MMA fighters in the UFC. I mentioned in the live stream I did earlier on today, the difference between the economic model for, the average boxing show, the typical boxing show, compared to a UFC show. And so just to quickly go over it again, in boxing, normally you'll have one broadcaster showing a fight or showing a card, right? So the broadcaster will typically take, as I understand it, between 40 to 50% of the revenue. The remaining 50 or 60% will be split between the fighters on the card and the promoter, with the promoter taking 25% and the fighters splitting 75% between them. Okay, that's the boxing model. Whereas in UFC, it's the inverse of that, where the promoter, as in UFC, the company, will take 75% of the money and they'll only leave 25% to be split between the fighters. That is how radically different the money is, the money distribution is in UFC compared to boxing. And somebody quite rightly pointed out on the previous live stream I did earlier on today that if you try to have a UFC style system in boxing where as soon as you turn pro, basically you're being matched tough in pro fights, fighters may end up having much shorter careers because boxers take a lot more punishment to the head, a lot more brain damage, basically. They incur a lot more brain damage than MMA fighters do. MMA fighters don't spend as much time getting punched in the head as boxers because they've got grappling, kicking, leg kicks and all that type of stuff. So in that sense, boxing is actually a far more dangerous sport, even though in MMA people get their legs snapped and arms dislocated and all that kind of stuff, which obviously looks grim. But as far as brain damage, no, MMA is way safer than boxing, actually. So, yeah, that's a very good point the person raised in the previous live stream. Are these boxers in this league going to have very short careers because of the format? If the format is exactly like UFC, that is. It might not be. They might tweak it. They might already know that some of these things could be an issue. So we will see. But I think in terms of the success of the boxing league, with the people involved, Turki Al-Sheikh, the president of the WWE, his first name keeps escaping me for some reason, but his surname is Khan, and then of course Dana White. I mean, these are heavy hitters in the world of business and in the world of sports. Well, WWE, sports entertainment, very, very heavy hitters. Are they all billionaires? Turki Al-Sheikh has certainly got access to billions. I'm not sure if Dana White is a billionaire. He might be. And Khan, I'm not sure, but they're certainly very rich people. They're very powerful, very influential, and they have powerful platforms, right? You look at Khan with the WWE, I mean, a tremendous platform where he can promote boxers coming through from grassroots, sign them when they turn pro and build their stories, build their profile and so on. That's what they're going to be aiming to do. The same with Dana White. And again, presumably that's going to be on ESPN with Dana White. So we're going to see how well they do with acquiring grassroots talent. You can always get boxers, right? You can always sign boxers. There are over 20,000 active male boxers in the world and more turning pro all the time. But will they be able to get the best talent from the amateur ranks? That's the question. Because presumably the other promoters will still be offering big checks, right? Lucrative contracts to turn pro with them. with the promise of millions and millions and millions with the tried and tested old boxing economic model. Whereas the UFC style model with this boxing league, I mean, maybe they'll initially try and tempt them with big signing bonuses and what have you. But how many of them coming out of the amateurs who had a lot of success in the amateurs are going to go for that? You know, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. If it works, then yeah, the likes of Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, and the old school promoters are in serious trouble over the long term. But if it doesn't work, you know, maybe it's a failed experiment. We'll see how it goes. Our man says Dana is a sausage, though. Well, he certainly doesn't pay his fighters, in my opinion, what he should be paying them. Isaac says Hatman UFC is both the promoter and the broadcaster, hence why they probably take that much. No. The UFC do not have a television network. UFC is on ESPN, so ESPN is the broadcaster. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, UFC, there's no such thing as a UFC channel, and if there is, I can't imagine many people watch it, right? People watch ESPN to get their UFC content in the United States, and in the UK, I think it's still TNT, is it, that shows UFC? Now, Isaac says, in the end, the average UFC fighter is paid more than the average boxer. Only the big names in boxing make that much. Yeah, I don't think that's true at all. Because it depends on how you do the average. If you're comparing, if you mathematically take the highest paid boxer and the lowest paid boxer and then work out the median or whatever, you know, I'm not great at mathematics, but you know how to work out averages, yeah? You'll find, I'm sure, that the average boxer, when you do the maths, makes more than the average UFC fighter. But UFC, you have to understand, is not an entire sport. It is one promotional house. They've only got, is it 1,000 fighters? 1,000 fighters, maybe at most. UFC, it's a small, it might even be less than that, a few hundred at any one time. Boxing is an entire sport with, I think it's around 24,000 active pro fighters. So it's really difficult to compare UFC to boxing because the number of participants is so massively different. But I can certainly tell you that because boxing is so big, there are far more boxers in the world making big money than there are UFC fighters or MMA fighters even. There are far more boxers making big money. And Ayed is making a good point here. He says, Ben Whittaker is paid more than most UFC champions and Ben Whittaker hasn't even won a belt. Yeah, because boxing is really a mainstream sport in the UK, you get guys at British title level, in some cases, making really good money. I mean, you look at Fraser Clark and Fabio Wardley. They would have been making good money for their fights. You know what I mean? British title level, and they'll probably be getting paid more than a lot of UFC champions. So it is location dependent, but in certain countries, boxers at a not particularly high level are making a lot of money. Charles B says UFC fighters are completely owned by the company. They have to wear what they tell them, and they are used for the games. True indeed. True indeed. They are owned by the company. UFC never allows any one fighter to become a bigger brand than the company itself. And that's a strategic thing. That's another thing I don't like about the UFC. They take the individuality out of it. Nobody's allowed to be bigger than the company. And that is exactly why some of the biggest names in UFC have had to actually leave their own sport and do something very dangerous for them and very detrimental to their reputation, which is to go fight in professional boxing. Conor McGregor is one of the biggest stars the UFC's ever had. He had to go and fight Floyd Mayweather to get the biggest payday of his career? Why, given the enormous amounts of money that UFC make, the enormous profits they make, why couldn't they pay him that kind of purse within the UFC? They've got the money, but they're just greedy. They want to keep it for all the people that don't actually have to fight. All the men in suits get all that money. Whereas in boxing, if you build yourself up into a star, you're going to get that money. You're going to get the payoff. Waved says, I really don't like this Hatman Turkey and Dana are going to try and monopolize boxing. Yeah, they may try. I'm not sure if they'll succeed though, because boxing is so big. And remember, when the UFC started, they were pretty much the only game in town. So they were able to build themselves up. You see, as the UFC grew as a company, they were also growing the sport alongside it. That's why UFC is synonymous with MMA. For the average member of the public, they only know UFC when it comes to MMA. Whereas in boxing, that's very, very different, isn't it? In boxing, people know Top Rank, they know Golden Boy, they know Matchroom, they know Queensbury, etc., etc. They don't even know PBC. Whereas in MMA, ask the average member of the public which MMA companies they know. They only know UFC. Unless you're like a hardcore UFC fan, MMA fan, and then you might know the PFL and Bellator and, the various others. But the vast majority of people, they only are going to know UFC. Boxing is a much bigger sport. Much bigger. There are far more participants in boxing than there is in MMA. So trying to monopolize boxing is a much bigger task than what they did with UFC. A much, much, much bigger task. Way, way, way bigger. And I think some people don't realize what a massive undertaking it is to try and put boxing under one umbrella. It is an enormous task. Panther says, Turkey shows are already the best in boxing. I'm afraid they can do it. Yeah, but Turkey's shows are the best in boxing now. Why? Because fighters are being paid a lot of money. And these promoters are being paid a lot of money to work with each other, right? As soon as fighters are no longer paid a lot of money and these promoters are not being paid a lot of money, subsequently, how loyal are they going to be to Turkey then? They're going to break away, I mean, Turkey hasn't yet managed to buy these companies. Has he offered to buy these companies behind the scenes? Buy out Matchroom and buy out Queensbury, buy out Golden Boy, Top Rank, and so on. And these companies all have their own ambitions. So it's quite a complicated, as I say, undertaking. Because these companies would all have to agree, okay, yeah, we'll let Turkey buy us all out and do what he wants with boxing. And again, because boxing is like the Wild West, and there is a culture of, managers all over the place and new promotional companies starting all the time. And you've got multiple broadcasters as well. That's another thing that people are not really considering with boxing. So all the major promoters pretty much are now on DAZN other than PBC. But that means that there's an opportunity. Well, actually, Ben Shalom is not with DAZN yet. But that means there's an opportunity if some fighters become disgruntled, if some fighters become disillusioned or whatever the case may be, with the direction that, let's say, Turkey may try and take boxing down in the future with Dana White, there's an opportunity then for a fighter outside of that or a promoter, should I say, outside of that ecosystem to say, okay, well, we're going to do it the old way. We're going to pay fighters fair, so on and so forth. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a tried and tested system that's been going on for decades in boxing that operates that way, that can pay fighters big bucks. So, yeah, again, boxing is a much, 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 much bigger sport than MMA and UFC in particular. So trying to put all of that under one roof and control everybody, and it's very, very difficult. We'll see whether they can do it, but as I say, it's not like what they've done with UFC, because UFC is tiny compared to the entire sport of boxing. I had to laugh when some MMA fans were trying to debate me on this. I'm like, are you crazy? Go to BoxRec and you can look up how many active male fighters there are. Just male fighters. There's something in the region of 24,000. 24,000. Whereas active MMA fighters in the world, there might be a couple of thousand, 2,000 or 3,000 at the most. Professionals I'm talking about. Fee Khabib says, Turkey and Dana have been plotting this for the last 2 years. The plan is in place. In 3 years' time, the Ring Magazine belt will be the equivalent of the UFC and MMA. I'm not sure about that, because if you look at Frank Warren, for example, and some of the other boxing promoters, they've signed a lot of new talent. Is that new talent? That new talent knows the kind of money that the big names in boxing today are making. The Tyson Furies, the Usyks, the Joshuas, the lower down the weight classes, Terence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez. They know the kind of money they're making, and they understand, they know the way the money is divided between promoters and fighters and so on. They know that in boxing, the promoters get 25%. They're not getting 75% like Dana White. So what would the incentive be, for example, for a Moses Itauma, who's only 20 years of age? Why would he suddenly leave Frank Warren and join Turkey's boxing league? Do you know what I mean? If they're not paying big bucks, what would the incentive for it be? If the Saudis stop giving Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn big budgets like they're giving them now for their shows, then surely they'll just break away and go do their own thing again like they were doing before. So logistically, I'm not sure that they'll manage to take over in such a short space of time. I find that difficult to envision. Maybe I'm underestimating them, but I don't see it in such a short space of time. I would think that this will be a much more long-term project where they wouldn't really have created big stars yet. When I say big stars, if it's a UFC type scenario where, it's a star in terms of a big name, but they're not really paying them that much money. I don't think they'll be able to do that in anything less than 5 years. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm underestimating them, but I reckon it's going to be at least 5 years before they manage to create a star from that league. Because, again, unless you're signing people who are already on the way to becoming stars now, then, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. Fee Khabib says, one thing Turkey won't do is pay less than Warren and Hearn. Well, for their major fighters, Warren and Hearn were paying a lot of money. When Tyson Fury, not as much as Turkey, obviously, because Turkey isn't concerned, at least not for the most part, with trying to profit from shows. So, he can pay more, but Warren and Hearn with like Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, both of those guys were getting $20 million a fight on the regular. Now, Wave says, I might be on Tank's side with this Turkey guy, not going to lie. He seems dodgy. Bringing Dana into boxing just confirmed it to me. I'm certainly not on Tank's side. Because Tank's an idiot, because PBC are not good for boxing. You know, the way I look at boxing, I don't look at Turkey as being any kind of savior. I look at promoters, and I'm including Turkey in this, the same way I would look at, you know, a politician. They're there to be, they're there to do things for you, right? I mean, it doesn't usually work that way in politics, but in theory, they're there to serve you. And when they're not serving you, you get rid of them. You're not supposed to get attached to politicians. This is one of the big mistakes that most people make, is they get like emotionally attached to politicians. That is the dumbest thing that you could ever do. Okay? You look at politicians as employees. That's what they're officially supposed to be. Public servants. And when they stop serving you the way you want to be served, you get rid of them. You don't get attached to them. You know, they certainly are not attached to you. Trust me. And so that's the way I look at boxing promoters, including Turkey, is as long as they're doing things that are benefiting boxing fans and benefiting boxers, cool. As soon as they go off that path, then I'm going to turn against them. It's like when PBC first came on the scene and they were putting all the, you know, boxing shows on what they call network television in the US and free-to-air television or terrestrial TV in the UK, you know, different terminology. So when PBC first launched, I was very high on them. I was saying, oh, they're doing great, because at the time they were good for boxing. But once they became bad for boxing, then I started saying, well, they're bad for boxing. You see what I'm saying? I'm not emotionally attached to any boxing promotion or anything like that. I'm just all about, what have you done for me lately? You know, I'll turn on these boxing promoters in a heartbeat. It all comes down to what they're doing at the time. And as it stands right now, Turkey's doing far more good for boxing than PBC are. PBC are terrible for boxing right now, and they're terrible for boxers too. Look how inactive all these fighters have been with PBC. Terrible. PBC have blocked so many fights from happening. Fights which have happened with Turkey. So, yeah, I don't see it as a thing where you have to put all your eggs in a particular basket, nail your colors to one mast and be in for life, you know, ride that till the wheels fall off. No, I'm not about that. I don't feel any kind of sense of loyalty to any boxing promoter. Now, Maxwell Graham says, Hatman, with regards to crime in New York, it's actually worse in many aspects compared to the 80s, apart from homicides, violent crime. Regular crime like theft is really up because of the Democrats. Yeah, I completely disagree with that. In this day and age, because there's cameras everywhere, and because forensics are much more advanced than they were back in the 80s, what happens is the detection of crime, certain types of crime, is higher now because there's the means. There's cameras everywhere, forensics is better, so on and so forth. So certain crimes get more reported these days. Because it doesn't make sense that homicides would be vastly higher in the 80s than they are now, but theft would be lower. I find that impossible to believe. I think it's just a matter of catching thieves is easier today because of the cameras and the forensics and all that type of stuff. And because people aren't as afraid to report crimes today as they were back in the 80s. And a lot of neighborhoods back in the 80s, you don't talk to the police or else you're going to have even more problems. So no, and because some people have made the same correlation with the UK, because in the UK, in the early 90s, the murder rate was much higher than it is now. And then other people have said, yeah, but other crimes are higher now than they were in the 80s, in the early 90s. I was around in the early 90s. I remember what it was like. I was there. Okay? In the early 90s in London was far more dangerous in every way. There was far more street robberies. I mean, in the area I grew up in, Brixton, people used to get robbed so frequently. It's unbelievable how brazen the robberies were. You go to Brixton today, you don't see anything like that. Yeah, there's robberies still, but not on the level that there was back in the days. Like, On the trains and on the buses in South London, gangs of young boys would come on those trains and buses and rob everybody all the time. You see, but back then, those types of crimes weren't getting reported as much, and they weren't getting prosecuted as much as they would today because of all the cameras and forensics and camera phones and all that kind of thing. So now I totally reject the notion, even though the statistics might show it, I totally reject the notion that NYC is more dangerous now or higher crime in terms of robberies. No way. I just think the crime detection is better now and so on. But because again, why would there be, let's say, 5 or 6 times more homicides in New York back then, but then way lower robberies? It doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just a detection thing because, of course, with homicides, that's one of the most easily detectable crimes because you've got a dead body in most cases. Island Grill says, phone theft is rife in London now. We have electric bikes. Well, obviously back in the 90s, there was no mobile phones or very few of them. So, you know, the more phones there are, you would expect there to be more theft of them because there's more of them around. In the early 90s, there was no mobile phones. King says, Hatman, who's funnier, Chris Eubank or Muhammad Ali? I would say Muhammad Ali by a mile, but that's me personally. But Chris Eubank Sr. is certainly very funny, an eccentric character. Ayed says, James DeGale had the best attitude with promoters. Yeah, don't get emotionally attached, but obviously he's a fighter. I'm saying as fans, we should have the same attitude because so many fans get, as I say, emotionally attached to promoters. I don't get it. And they assume that you're the same as them. You know, so during Eddie Hearn's heyday, when he was putting on a lot of good shows and he was doing a lot of good for boxing, and I was acknowledging the good that Eddie Hearn was doing, I was being accused of being an Eddie Hearn fanboy. There were some idiots claiming that I work for Eddie Hearn. I've never met Eddie Hearn a day in my life. I've seen him, but I've never formally met him, nor have I formally ever spoken to anyone that works for Matchroom. The idea that I work for them is ridiculous. Okay? But simply because I was giving Eddie Hearn credit for the good he was doing for boxing, fanboys assumed that I had the same motives that they did. Oh, you're an Eddie Hearn fanboy, and it was this, either you're a Frank Warren guy or you're an Eddie Hearn guy. That's what it was in the UK. But no, I was never loyal to Eddie Hearn because that's not the way I'm wired. I'm not interested in being a fanboy for a particular promoter. They don't pay my bills. I don't give a damn about Eddie Hearn, but I'll give credit where it's due. And there was a time when Eddie Hearn was doing a lot of good. So I gave him credit when he was doing good, and when he started doing bad, I started saying, hey, Eddie Hearn's on the slide now. And so the Eddie Hearn fanboys then started attacking me. Rather than the Frank Warren fanboys having a go at me, then the Eddie Hearn fanboys started having a go at me. But where are they now? I mean, it's undeniable at this point that Eddie Hearn's on the slide. Bexy says, Hatman, I hear rumors Hearn is retiring. No, I just saw an interview that he did, I think with IFL, with Cole McGuigan, the Irish kid. And Hearn says he's not going to retire within the next 5 years. And he said that people will often say to him that they reckon he's going to go on till he's an old man like Bob Arum into his 90s if he lives that long. And Hearn says he doesn't anticipate himself doing that, but you never know. So again, he claims he's not going to be retiring in the next 5 years. Charles B says, did you record these videos, Hatman? What you mean the stuff on screen? No, I sent one of my clandestine, how could I describe them? Agents to get this footage for me. One of my clandestine agents. Some of the footage that I show, like this stock footage, I did take. But some of it was taken by other people on my behalf. Shout out to Charles B. Oh, there was a super chat. Okay, let me check the super chat. 1 second. Yeah, I missed it. Okay, shout out to Rep for the super chat. It says, what's the most important fight you've seen? Most important fight? God, I don't know whether I can even answer. I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, the most important fight I've seen? Ever in the history of boxing? Just distill your question down a little bit, because that's a very, very broad question. What's the most important fight I've seen? Charles B says, your little bird's like Varys from Game of Thrones. Yeah, my little bird, my little agents. Most significant boxing match in my life and why? That is such a broad question. That is such a broad question. There have been so many, you know, historic fights in my lifetime. From Mike Tyson becoming youngest heavyweight champion of all time, becoming undisputed. Fights in the 80s with Sugar Ray Leonard and, you know, the Fab Four, which were huge and significant for their own reasons. Fights throughout the 1990s, you know, Roy Jones moving up to heavyweight and doing what he did. Obviously undisputed at heavyweight several times. Mike Tyson, undisputed in the 80s. Holyfield was undisputed because he didn't consolidate the belts. He inherited undisputed from Buster Douglas, who took it from Mike Tyson. There have just been so many historic fights and monumental events. It's really hard to pick one over them, you know? But what I will say is, Alexander Usyk becoming undisputed was momentous for boxing. And I don't think people really understand how important that was at this juncture. I think when they look back in hindsight, they'll realize how monumental it was. Because Usyk really saved the heavyweight division, is what he did. He saved it. People talk about Turkey saving this, and no. Usyk saved the heavyweight division in terms of the integrity of it. And he you know, there maybe hasn't been anyone in my lifetime that has done that type of job in the heavyweight division. Obviously, there's been other people that have been undisputed, but undisputed wasn't quite as urgent. It wasn't quite as desperately needed in the previous decades that I lived through as it was in this current era with Usyk. It was so badly needed for the integrity of heavyweight boxing and the integrity of boxing as a whole, because, you know, the heavyweight division is like held above other divisions, whether people like it or not, in the minds of the public. So, yeah, that was of tremendous, I think, historical significance, was the Usyk beating Tyson Fury twice. Very, very important that happened. He cleaned up boxing, you know, cleaned up the heavyweight division. And he saved it. Usyk saved the heavyweight division in terms of its reputation, you know. Bexy says, Hatman, when you were younger, did any promiscuous come on to you? I had an older woman flirt and poke me a bit. Just remembered today it was strange. Have I ever had promiscuous women come on to me? Or did you mean to say older women? Many promiscuous women in general, yeah. Older women, yeah. A few times when I was a bouncer. Older women are the worst. You know, like old slags and that are out on, I don't know, hen do's and whatever. They are the most sexually aggressive women you'll ever come across. It's like middle-aged, single women in a group. They're like very sexually aggressive. They'll grab you and, you know, They'll grab your family jewels. You know what I mean? Like, they do crazy stuff. A bunch of old, like in their 40s or 50s, washed up old hags. Oh my gosh. They act like the law don't exist. You know? Shout out to Gaz for the super chat. He says, prime Larry Holmes versus Pete Lennox Lewis. Oh, that's such a tough one to call. Such a tough one to call. I'm going to upset a lot of people and say Lennox Lewis. On points. But it's a very close one. Okay, I'm trying to see what... I think Fury Usyk won. Yeah, I'm not seeing the context of Wave's last comment. You're saying, or race don't matter with a question? I'm not sure what that's in relation to. KS says, whenever I'm in a drought, they're my go-to. Yeah, they've got a name for those women now, haven't they? Cougars. That's what they call them now, cougars. And they are incredibly sexually aggressive. Yeah? Them old, washed up, old trouts. Yeah, they're very sexually aggressive. Felix says, Hatman, do you think active fighters could be treated better if more retired fighters got involved and got themselves into positions of power in these organizations like the WBC, WBA, etc.? That's a good question, because retired fighters tend to get involved in boxing promotion and management. I'm not sure how many of them are involved in the sanctioning bodies. So that is a good question. Maybe the sanctioning bodies won't let you get in there if you're a retired fighter, you know? Maybe it's like politics, where anyone that's actually got the good of the people, you know, as their main focus, they're not going to let you get anywhere in politics. You know what I mean? You have to be, you have to toe the party line. They've got whips in these parties. In British politics, they call them whips. Whip you into line. If you are not towing the party line, well, you're not going to get anywhere within the party. You're coming in there and you got a honest intent to actually, give power to the people. Bro, they're going to get you the hell out of there. And maybe sanctioning bodies in boxing are the same. Maybe if you try to go in there as like a former fighter and you're hoping to clean things up, they'll be like, nah, let's get him out of here. He don't belong around here. A striker says, having worked as a bouncer, I can relate to everything you said, Hatman. Yeah, man. You will find that if it's like a group of women in their 40s, bro, women in their 20s generally are not going to be all over you like that. One or two might when they're really drunk. But women in their 40s are terrible, mate. 40s and up, even mid-30s, but certainly 40s and up in groups, terrible. Ayad says, Hatman, what was that film that you walked out of the other day? It was called The Monkey. It's like allegedly a comedy horror. Now, Evil Uncle Phil says, as expected, Hearn is likely to retire just after AJ retires. There are no cash cows left in Matchroom. Yeah, he certainly doesn't appear to be future-proof in the business, does he, Eddie Hearn? He seems to have given up competing with the likes of Frank Warren to sign the best new talent coming through, or even competing for the signature of existing talent. Charles B says, Hatman, did you see the trailer for the new 28 Days Later? Yeah, it's called 28 Years Later, isn't it? Yeah, I did see one of the trailers. I'm not sure if it's the latest trailer, but a few weeks ago I saw a trailer for 28 Years Later. And I just shake my head, to be honest. 28 Days Later, the original was a classic. Then they had the sequel, which was rubbish. I can't imagine that this next one, 28 Years Later, is going to be any better than the second film. So I just shake my head. And what's the guy who made the first two? Boyle, something Boyle. Is it Danny Boyle? Because he was doing all right back in the days. You know, he put together a few films which were popular. I wasn't massively a fan of any of them, really. But they were popular films. 28 Days Later is the one I did like. But he also directed The Beach, right? And Sunshine is another sci-fi film. He directed Sunshine. And there was also, what was the one in India? What's the one in India that Danny Boyle directed? Can't remember the name. Slumdog Millionaire. Yeah, Slumdog Millionaire. That was maybe his biggest film, I want to say. Yeah, you got it. Slumdog Millionaire. But since then, what has he really done? The fact that he's trying to resurrect and bring back 28 Days... Oh, Trainspotting, of course. Yeah, that was a cult classic in the UK. Trainspotting, yeah. That might have been a film that put him on the map. But, yeah, now he's doing 28 Years Later. It's like, he seems to have run out of ideas, so he's trying to recycle old movies. So, yeah, I don't really have high hopes for that one. Wave says, when I was 21, this 45-year-old middle-class woman cheated on her husband with me. Hatman, why do they cheat on their husband even though he is rich? Because the husband is probably tired of smashing the wife. Maybe the husband was never really that good at, laying it down in the bedroom in the first place. So that's what a lot of these women are like. They're with the husband for the money, but then when it comes to the bedroom stuff, they're trying to find a younger guy. And it might be the case that the husband, if the husband's got money, he's probably got side pieces too. Do you know what I mean? So it is what it is. He probably got side pieces, and the wife is deciding to do her own thing as well because she doesn't feel desired by the husband. The question I'm asking is, when you were 21, why were you smashing a 45-year-old, bro? Bro, I'm that age now, and I wouldn't smash a 45-year-old. So I'm not sure why you were smashing 45-year-olds when you were 21. Bro, I wouldn't touch a 45-year-old chick now. And that's my age group. Wave says she was rich. So, you want money from a woman? Bexy says, Hatman, have you seen the movie Moon? AI is manipulating a guy in a spaceship. Duncan Jones director, David Bowie's. I haven't seen it, no. Yeah. See, Wave didn't realize what he was confessing to there. So, man, I'm trying to go in the comments here. They have experience. I mean, hey, maybe you got a fetish for old bags. I don't know. Bro, I would never touch a woman in my age category, bro. They're so washed. Orca says the duality of man, younger men want older. I guess you meant to say older women and vice versa. Yeah, I never wanted like old women when I was young at all. If a girl was like a couple years older, yeah, but not like decades older. I was never attracted to that. Evil Uncle Phil says, of course they have experience. They're ancient. Wave says she was throwing it on me. I tell you what, them 45-year-old women, they can throw it somewhere else, mate. And that's why women my age always try to shame men of the same age, because we can get girls that are much younger, and it's more difficult for them to get younger guys, but we can get younger girls like easily, you know, if you got your shit together. And that's why they resent us so much and try to shame us and call us all kind of names. It's like, whatever. Why would I want you, you old bag? It don't make no sense. Kylie says Wave was banging Stifler's mum. What's that movie called? Is that American Pie, right? With Stifler. Island Grill says, what's your age limit? Well, it's kind of looks and personality dependent. But I want to say the upper limit I would go to might be like an absolute push. And it depends for what purposes. If it's just to smash, the upper limit might be 35, 36 to smash. Yeah. But if we're talking about like a serious relationship or wifey, bro, if she's any older than like 30, I mean, she'd have to be exceptional at 33, 34 to make me wife her. Really, she'd have to be in her mid to late 20s. Yeah. 33, 34, you gotta be damn near perfect. Seriously. Mid 40s, I mean, are you having a laugh? Hell no. Nicholas says, I got a 45-year-old obsessed with me right now. My ex is 23. Kea says, anything under 30 is a write-off for a relationship. Well, in the West, maybe, yeah. But outside of the West, no. You can find plenty of females under 30 that are great for a relationship. But in the West, yeah, dealing with under 30 in a relationship is very difficult. Charles B says they usually hit the wall after their late 20s. Ed says the worst film I saw in the cinema was Predator 2018. Don't think I ever saw that. Or maybe I did. I don't know. If I did, it was probably so bad I've forgotten it. And actually, no, it can't have been that bad, because if it was, I mean, maybe it was bad, but not diabolical bad. Because if it was diabolical bad, I would have remembered it for how bad it was. Grind says, I have to agree. I mean, I'm 19 and I've been with ladies in their mid-30s. Happy to say they are great for me. Okay, so you're 19 and you've been with ladies in their mid-30s and you like them? Hey, to each his own. Javo says, what happened to your boy Chris Andre? Is he ever coming back? I have no idea. He corresponded with someone in the Element group maybe 6 months ago, and he said he's all good. But I'm not sure whether he's coming back to YouTube. I've got no idea. Triple R says, girls 18 to 28 seem impossible to pull, even the dead ones. 35 and up are easy. Being 26 is frustrating, as I can't introduce a woman over 28 to my parents. Yeah, see, this is the problem, isn't it? That men are facing in the West. is that these young girls nowadays are going on terrible. You can't pair bond with them. They are narcissistic beyond imagination, and they are not raised to be agreeable to men. So you have to go overseas. It is what it is. You have to go overseas, my guy. And when I say go overseas, it's not go overseas, to smash some girls or bring girls back to the West. No. You have to actually move overseas. That's what it has to be. For a young guy like you, don't know what kind of girls you like, but there are certain countries that I may be able to recommend. Grind says, I find that mid-30s are straightforward, no BSing, whereas girls my age are too feminized. No, the girls in the mid-30s are just as much feminist as all that's happened is that they've become desperate. That's it. Once girls get past the age of 30, they start getting desperate. That's all it is. Because they become desperate, their standards come down. They don't have all the ridiculous checklists that they had before. He's got to be this height. He's got to make this money. He's got to have this car. He's got to, ridiculous checklists. All of a sudden, as they get older and past the age of 30, the checklist gets real short. That's all it is. Faultline says, you can definitely find good people anywhere. They'll just have to find them. Well, yeah, technically it's possible to find a good woman anywhere, but, we're logical as men, right? So we deal with probabilities. The probability is that most guys, let's say under the age of 35, are not going to find a good woman in the West in their lifetime. That's the probability for most of them. A tiny few will. The vast majority will not. So it's logical to take yourself out of that environment and put yourself in an environment where your chances, the probability of you finding a good woman are higher. It's just logical, right? So that's what I would recommend people to do. Nicholas says, I live in America and that hasn't been my experience. They become bitter and mean more than desperate. Maybe it depends on who you are. If you are the same age as them, then they're going to be bitter and mean towards you. Especially when they see you doing well for yourself or anything like that. They're going to be very bitter and mean towards you. But if you are a younger guy, oh my gosh, they're going to bend over, not even backwards, right? At the drop of a hat. So I think it really depends on who you are. But yeah, certainly for younger guys, let's say a guy in his early mid-20s, a woman in her mid-30s is just going to be totally desperate for that guy. So she's not going to have very high expectations. Shout out to Liam in Chains. He says, big up Hatman. I know you think Joyce's speech hasn't changed, but I have noticed he has aged terribly these last few years. Same with Chisora. I know we all age, but do you think maybe worse with CTE? Well, with Chisora, I absolutely concur. Chisora's speech has deteriorated significantly. 100%. I just don't agree with Joyce. I know loads of other people are, saying this. There's Matt, there's yourself, there's various other people who are saying it. But I was even going back and looking at old Joyce interviews earlier on today. And I don't see the deterioration. He's always had really bad speech from early on in his career. So, but with Chisora, yeah, 100%. Chisora's speech is terrible now compared to what it was 5-10 years ago, for sure. And it's brain damage, the cumulative effect to the punches that he's taken over the years in sparring and in pro fights. Simon Jones says, you telling me you wouldn't want someone that Emily Blunt? She's 40. Hell no. I mean, she's not my type anyway. I like black girls, but I would never date a woman who's 42. I don't have kids, right? So if I settle down with someone, I'm not bloody getting with someone who's 42. I'm getting a girl who's of childbearing age. Some old hag. Like, if I have a choice, right, as a man, between a woman who's 42 and a woman who's like 25, and both of them like me, why would I choose the 42-year-old woman? It literally doesn't make any sense. You would only choose the 42-year-old woman if you've already got kids and maybe you've got a real strong connection with this woman, or you don't have a choice and the 42-year-old is as good as you can get. People mentioning all these celebrity women who are not my type anyway, in terms of the individuals, and I generally don't like celebrity women in general. You know, I've never, even when I was young, I was never really into celebrity girls at all. Singers and actresses and all that. Never really liked them. I'm much more attracted to, you know, women I see in real life that work in a shop or something, you know. Liam in Chain says, only NPCs spend time fantasizing about celebrities. When someone asks me, who's your hall pass, I have to walk away. Yeah, I've never been into celebrity chicks, man. Not my thing. So a lot of these celebrities, or some of them at least, I don't even know who they are when people mention them. I don't know who that is. I don't follow the celebrity world like that. But you see, people still not getting it. Bexy says, if Will Smith's wife came onto you, what would you do? Jada Pinkett. Old, decrepit, cheating. I mean, come on. Yeah, see, somebody came with a perfect answer there. Evil Uncle Phil said, Jada is a witch, you must pray. There you go. Pull out a crucifix and some garlic or something. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Some of you men are so easily impressed. And, you know, if I was a celebrity, and this is one of the things I've never understood about these male celebrities, is why they date female celebrities. It just seems like the dumbest move ever. It's so stupid to be dating a female celebrity if you're a male celebrity. Like, what are you doing? It makes absolutely no sense. The wise move is always, if you're a male celebrity, rich, all that type of stuff, is to get a normal girl. I don't mean normal in terms of her looks, but, you know, somebody who's not in the industry, who's not rich and all that kind of stuff. That's the girl that you get. You don't go out with a celebrity. And, you know, it's like in the world of business. Most successful businessmen don't go hunting for like a successful businesswoman to marry. Most of them marry a regular woman. Yeah, most successful businessmen, which constitute the vast majority of millionaires in the world, right? People making millions or even billions, the vast majority of them marry regular women, not women who are making, career women who are making, no, they generally don't do that. Some of them might, but the majority of them don't do that. They marry just regular women doing regular jobs. And they'll often marry them young. When the guy's on the come up and he's maybe just reaching the millions or he's making, 6 figures or whatever, he'll marry a regular woman then and she'll be with him on his journey until he becomes, multi-millionaire, billionaire and all that type of stuff. That's the way you do it. You don't like become a celebrity and then marrying another celeb. That's just foolishness. It's just asking for trouble. Somebody here says high earning women are not submissive. Gender roles are not some patriarchal artificial construct. Gender roles are written into our DNA. Gender roles are ubiquitous in nature, right? And gender roles exist for a reason. In order to have a cohesive relationship that works, in most cases, the man and the woman are going to need to play different roles within the relationship. It's like a football team, yeah? Everybody has to play their position in order for the team to win. If all 11 players are trying to play striker, your team's going to lose. Do you know what I mean? So you have to play the position that you were created for the team to win. So if as the man you're the striker and the woman wants to be the striker as well, well, you ain't going to win as a team, are you? Because she looks at the striker as like, a position that she covets. She's not happy playing left back or whatever, or in midfield. She wants to be the one, the way she perceives it, getting all the glory, being the striker, scoring the goals. So, and look, if a woman wants to pursue her career and all that, that's her prerogative. I got no issue with her doing that, but she's probably not going to make a good wife. Just being real. Yeah, if she wants to do that, she should be free to go and do that. But I wouldn't recommend men go and seek those kind of women out for marriage. Because, yeah, they are not focused on the family. They're focused on their own goal and their own mission, and the family is secondary to it. See, that's one of the differences between men and women when they make money. Men generally will make money in order to be providers for their family, for their kids and their wife even. They like providing for the wife. They like providing for the kids. They feel proud to be able to provide for their family. These are the things men will talk about. And when they mean their family, they're talking about their own family that they created, the wife they married, the kids they have. Yeah, as well as the extended family. Whereas when a woman makes money, she's more thinking about her own desires rather than providing for a family. So it's a different mindset. So, yeah, I don't know why you would marry a woman like that. I don't know. Kane says women date up, men date down. Yeah, pretty much. Hypergamy is a real thing. It's written into female nature to be hypergamous. So, as a man, the logical thing to do is, as you say, date down. Date a woman who's not making as much as you, because then she'll be attracted to you. If you're dating a woman who's making as much as you or more, you're on shaky ground. I'm not saying it can never work, but you're on shaky ground because of hypergamy. Ayed says Wilder picked a bad one. Yeah, Wilder's a fool. These Instagram girls, thousands of followers and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know why. Like, seriously, when you are in a position like Deontay Wilder, you're a multi-millionaire. you know, he's got, you would think, everything going for him. And then he's going to pick some Instagram influencer as a wife? Like, yeah, the guy never had much intelligence, and that's an example of it. Matt G says, best example of someone picking badly is Kanye picking Kim Kardashian. Indeed. That's a great example. I don't know what is up with these male celebrities who do stuff like that. Very weird. But, you know, the celebrity culture is weird in general, right? And the masses kind of get it twisted because they think that the way that celebrity males behave is representative of how most rich men behave, but it's not at all. Celebrity culture is very different to like the culture of the majority of successful men. Let's say men who are making, you know, mid to high six figures or seven figures and up. Businessmen and whatnot, people high up in the corporate world or, you know, high up in engineering and, you know, whatnot. These guys do not live like Kanye West. They don't choose women the way that Kanye West would or whatever. They're far more sensible in the way they choose women and wives. These celebrity guys are moving weird. Jarvo says, did you know you can edit out the silence at the beginning of your lives? Yeah, I know that you can, but the reason that I often don't is because when you make an edit to a live stream, it removes the live chat. So that's why I prefer to leave it in most of the time. Sometimes I'll edit certain things out of a live stream because I said something which I think might get it demonetized. So I'll edit certain things out just to be on the safe side. But generally I leave in the bit at the start because as soon as you make an edit, it removes the live chat replay. And so when people are watching these live streams back, I think they prefer to be able to see the comments that I'm referring to. So that's why I don't do it. Somebody says a few minutes of fun can lead to a lifetime of regret. Yeah, people get carried away. Black Dynamite says, I feel like these celebrities get incentivized to wife up 304s. It seems so counterintuitive to do so. Yeah, maybe they do, because it does seem like a weird culture among male celebrities, wifing, you know, women who just have red flags all over them. It's a weird thing. Mr. Classic Metal, shout out for the super chat. He says, on top of that, Wilder's wife was a single mom. Indeed. That's a great point when he hooked up with her. And apparently she used to date Whyte and Big Baby Miller. Yeah, she was doing her rounds in the industry, allegedly. But Deontay Wilder is just a damn fool. And I think growing up, you see, Deontay Wilder is a country simpleton. So even though he's like tall and athletic and all this type of stuff, I suspect that growing up, he wasn't that popular with women because he wasn't like a hustler in the street or anything. When he started boxing, he was working as a waiter in some kind of restaurant in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You know? Smiling when he comes up to the table and what have you. So he was kind of like a goofy type of guy, I think, Deontay Wilder growing up. So I don't think he was that popular with women. I'm making assumptions here. But since he made some money and, you know, he's got all the drip now, the fast cars, the chains, all the attire to look the part. Now he's getting all kind of women coming onto him. I'm talking about during his title run, who he wouldn't have dreamed of being able to get when he was broke. You know? I mean, if you look at Deontay Wilder when he first came on the scene and became WBC heavyweight champion, the guy was dressing like an absolute hick. You know what I mean? Like a country bumpkin. He was dressing corny. And it was probably that woman that actually taught him how to dress. Do you know what I mean? To be more contemporaneous with other male celebrities who are quote unquote cool. Because prior to her, Wilder was, I mean, wearing dicky bow ties and he just looked like a proper country bumpkin. Black Dynamite says a 6'7" waiter is insane. Yeah, it looks goofy as hell, right? A 6'7" waiter with that country bumpkin accent and stuff like that. Probably ankle swinger trousers. You know, trousers, because he was poor back then, his trousers didn't even reach his feet. They were like swinging above his ankles, you know, like that. Wearing overalls, yeah, wrestling pigs, you know, in his part-time job, or maybe on his family farm, huh? Wrestling pigs back into the pen. In his dungarees. So yeah, Wilder lost his mind, I think, as soon as he started making money and was told how to dress more appropriately and not like a total country bumpkin goofy. And now he's got all these, like, you know, girls that he only fantasized about growing up coming onto him and hitting him up. And so his quality control just wasn't there because he was mesmerized, you know? Quality control in terms of their personality and whatnot. Tony says, do you listen to Darius M? Seems like you guys have similar views. I got no idea who that is. Evil Uncle Phil says, Wilder smashed his brother's girlfriend last year. Looks like karma. Yeah, I don't believe in karma, but yeah, Wilder did, according to his brother, smash his brother's girl, which is foul. Man's trying to do a Ryan Giggs out here. God, remember when Ryan Giggs smashed his brother's wife? Oh my God. Ryan Giggs is a demon. Imagine smashing your brother's wife. How demonic you have to be to do that. That's crazy, bro. Ryan Giggs is a demon, mate. And Ryan Giggs always came across like kind of a quiet type of guy, unassuming. And when it came out that he did that, it's like, whoa. Some of these guys are vicious out here. I'm just telling you, vicious. Makali says he played for the Red Devils too. Yeah, he was the real Red Devil. Never mind Alex Ferguson with his red face. The hairdryer in the dressing rooms. It was Ryan Giggs, the real Red Devil. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. KS says, how to approach girls in person. The apps are dead. Yeah, the apps are really just made to fleece men out of money. Approaching a girl in person, God, you got to do it in the right environment. You know, really and truly, the dating scene for men in the West, particularly in the cities, you know, in somewhere like London, if you're in your 20s or even early 30s, the dating scene for men is so dead. You've really got to meet women socially, you know, like through friends. Because trying to approach them, it's not like it was back in the days. These women are getting approached, if they're even half good looking, they're getting approached online and in person hundreds of times a week. So they're not going to be as receptive to being approached as women when I was growing up before social media. before the internet, the only place women got approached was in real life. And if the woman was like halfway good looking, a lot of guys would kind of be timid to approach, yeah? So it would only be left to the most confident guys to approach the girl. So, and again, you have to see the girl in order to approach her. And she's only going to be out and about for a few hours a day. So girls of my generation, before the internet, before social media, they were far more receptive to being approached because they didn't get as many approaches as they do today. So it was a lot easier for us to just, holler at girls and this, that, and the other. But you young guys today, man, you got it hard. I would not want to be young in your generation in the West dealing with what you have to deal with because it's a whole different game. I'm glad that I grew up in the last generation that were adults before social media. Yeah, I was an adult before social media came out. I was in the dating world long before, Instagram and dating apps and all that type of stuff. And it was way better, I can tell you that, for dating. A million times better. And yeah, as Evil Uncle Phil says there, the best way to meet women is through mutual friends and whatnot these days. You have to these days. Like, that's the way you're going to end up getting somewhere, is through mutual friends. Now, that would have been a massive problem for me. Like if I was a young guy in the West nowadays trying to date, girls my age, because I never liked, like when I was young, I never liked to date girls who I met through my friends. I never liked to do that. Yeah, because if the relationship broke up, things can get sticky. Some of these girls are crazy and weird. And, when they know your friends, then they're going to try to do revenge and start dating another one of your friends. It just gets funky. So I would never like when I was growing up, I would never date girls that were in my friend circle. I never did that. I would always go somewhere else to a different area and pick up girls there. I would never do it in my circles because I saw how sticky it got for some of my friends. Yeah, who met girls through our friend circle and then they broke up and then that girl ends up dating a next guy in our friend circle. Do you know what I mean? And then that causes beef between the guys. And yeah, I never like getting involved in stuff like that. But these days, that's the only option you've got, really. As a young guy, you have to meet a girl through the friend circle. Kylie says it's a minefield. Yeah, it's definitely a minefield. Ayed says the gig situation is wild because the brother only found out through the newspapers. Yeah, imagine that. Imagine the betrayal. See, it's one thing the wife doing what she did, which was foul. But the brother, oh my God. Seriously, that's crazy, bro. Like, I've got a brother I don't even talk to. Yeah, we don't get along at all. We never liked each other. I would never even dream of smashing his girl, having an affair with his girl, even though I don't like him. There's certain things you just don't do. But Ryan Giggs, I don't know what type of guy he is, bro. A foul guy, foul. Evil Uncle Phil says, and dating women from other cities as a Londoner is one of the best things. Brum women are more feminine than London women. Are they more feminine than London women? I dated a girl from Birmingham back in the days. And what I can tell you is that them times, this would have been very early 2000s, Birmingham girls absolutely loved London guys because there's a stigma about the Birmingham accent, and it is a hideously ugly accent, okay? And Birmingham girls just loved London guys to a level that was incredible. And it was so much that a lot of Birmingham guys would fake having a London accent when they would go to nightclubs and whatnot in order to pick girls up. They would literally live a lie and pretend that they were from London. just so they could get girls. That's how crazy it was back then. But yeah, in terms of Birmingham girls are more feminine, I mean, that's not something I particularly noticed. And I could tell you that their accent is just hideously ugly. I'm not sure how I managed to actually date that guy. I think I dated her for like 2 years. I'm not sure how I even managed to do that, given her accent was so awful. McGran says, Hatman, what's your thoughts on people getting with their friends' ex? To me, it's treasonous behavior. I mean, yeah, I had friends that did stuff like that, and I always just found it weird, you know? It's almost incestuous. It's weird. So I never went for any of that. As I said earlier on, I always would go for girls outside of my friend circle because I didn't want any funny business or weirdness going on. Shout out to Fight Sport Talk. Always good to have you on here, my brother. Good to have you on board. Ayed says, is the brother younger or older that you don't get on with? Older. Oh my gosh. Kylie says, speaking of sleeping with older women, remember Wayne Rooney banging pensioners back in the days? Oh, Wayne Rooney is a wrong'un. In fact, is waved Wayne Rooney in disguise. Yo, yo, where's waved at? It might be Wayne Rooney's soccer account. Yo, Wayne Rooney's got problems, bro. Because one of them decrepit old hags that he smashed, I swear she looked like she was damn near 60. Huh? And weren't Wayne in his 20s? Good God, man. Oh, someone says he was 16. Dear, what is wrong with Wayne Rooney? That's some kind of weird fetish, bro. That's it. Man's got a grandma fetish or something, Wayne Rooney. A weird guy. Yeah, nasty work. Damn right it's nasty work. I got a grandma fetish. He's one of them guys that goes to Pornhub and looks up like, you know, the granny videos. Some of these weird guys out here, man, you'd never know they have that kind of fetish, you know, because they're not going to say it around their friends. They only express it online, and, you know, when they go see like brasses, they go to the brass house and, you know, whoever the madam is there, and they're like, oh, you know, what would you like? Have you got any like women in their 60s? Even the madam has to raise an eyebrow, like, in her 60s. Oh, okay. Is that what you're into? Crazy work, yes. Diabolical work. Diabolical. React Paul with Madonna, of course. How could we forget React Paul? Dear, oh dear, oh dear. What is that boy up to? What is that boy up to? And he doesn't have the excuse of being broke. Yeah, because you go to like Jamaica and even certain African countries like Gambia is known for this, where like old decrepit women from the West go to Jamaica and go to, Gambia so they can like get smashed by these young guys in their 20s. And some of these young guys will like even marry old decrepit Western women in their 60s just so they can get citizenship in Europe or America or whatever, right? Because they're flat broke, they're hustling on the bloody beach, you know, selling rubbish souvenirs and basically selling their bodies to old women. So at least they've got an excuse that they come from abject poverty. Richard Riakpor's got a career. Obviously, you don't have Madonna money, but you don't need Madonna money. Once you've made a certain amount of money, then you're good. You don't need to do anything desperate from that point. So what is Richard Riakpor's excuse? He must be somebody that has a weird fetish for dusty old corpses. Do you know what I mean? It's a weird fetish, bro. Yeah. Black Dynamite says, I just know Riakpor's African parents are disappointed in him. That's a whole fact. That's a whole fact. Hey, it says plastic old corpses. Literally mum raw from out of a coffin. Dusty as hell. Awful. Bexy says Rooney is an animal. Well, that's one way to, one way to describe him. I mean, Riakpor has become like a laughing stock. Yeah? Talk Sport, they all crack jokes about him and Madonna. Everybody in the boxing fraternity is cracking jokes about him. So the man's got no shame. Lawrence Okolie even cracked me the hell up at the press conference when he was talking about the confrontation that he and Riakpor had at the cinema that time. And Lawrence Okolie with a completely straight face. Yeah, his deadpan was hilarious. Completely straight face. When whoever it was, Dev, or was it Ade or Dev? Whoever asked him what happened that led up to that confrontation. And Lawrence completely deadpan said, yeah, I just walked up to him and I said, Madonna's not, what did he say? Madonna's not young anymore. Or Madonna's old now. And you know he didn't say that to Richard Riakpor, but he was, you know, saying it to try and rile him up and take a dig. So he said, yeah, Madonna's old now. Oh my days. Riakpor is weird. That's just what it is. He's a weird guy. McLovin says, are you watching UFC 313 this weekend? Alex Pereira is fighting. I hadn't planned to, no. Truth be told, boxing has eclipsed the UFC majorly over the past year. Majorly. Internet tough guy. Cobweb crutches, indeed. Goozy says, after Dennis Rodman, Madonna was finished. Yeah. Madonna has looked haggard for decades. You know, when she was married to Guy Ritchie, she looked haggard even then. Shade says, Dana White's getting involved in boxing now. Have you heard? Yeah, I did a live stream about it earlier on today. So the previous live stream was all about that. Ayed says UFC pay-per-view numbers never get released. Maybe not these days. They're not doing as well as they were a few years ago. Boxing has taken the limelight away from UFC because of Turki Al-Sheikh putting on all these big fights. Wave says fighters better hurry up and get paid because fighters' pay will go way down if these guys get their way. They're already trying to get rid of the Ali Act. Well, the Ali Act only applies in America anyway. It's never applied in the UK. So they haven't had the Ali Act in the UK ever. Evil Uncle Phil says Madonna is a few years younger than Frank Warren. Crazy, right? Bring back Random Rush for Riakpor. That's a sick man. Black Dynamite says Ben Whittaker training with Andy Lee now. Yep. And that's kind of a logical move because he was with Sugar Hill. And Andy Lee's obviously an ex-Kronk man as well. So Bexy says, Hatman, if a cougar had billions, would you take her out if she's interested? You're telling me that you would take a cougar out if she had billions. I'm not at all interested in a woman's money. Doesn't matter if she's got billions or trillions. I've got no interest in her money. I'm not looking for a provider. I'm not a woman. So, I mean, I'm not attracted to a woman who can provide for me. I'm not some kind of like leech. I'm not one of these, broke guys coming from overseas who's got no money and no qualifications and they're just looking to, sponge off some woman. No. I have no interest in a woman's money. As somebody said earlier on, men, most men anyway, date down financially. So I'll tend to date women that make less than me because I understand hypergamy. They will see me as more attractive because I make more than them. So dating a woman who wow. Yeah. I've got no desire to get with some billionaire. To me, it's just weird. It's a very weird dynamic to be dating a billionaire cougar. I would never do it in a million years. You'd have to have like no pride or something, or no I don't even know how to describe it, but guys who do stuff like that are very, very odd. Very odd. I find them odd. Weird personality types, Because that's generally a female thing. Females will marry for money or get into relationships for money. For a man to do it, it's like, what kind of guy is he? Why is the guy hypergamous? You're supposed to be out there making your own money, not looking for a woman to take care of you. Nah, mate. Unless you're coming from the most desperate poverty, then I don't see any reason for a man to do that. Shade says, what guys should billionaire women get with then? Well, they get with whatever guys like them, but it's not me. That's all I can tell you. I'm sure there will be some guys that like him, but again, this is the catch-22 when it comes to female success. Is because women are hypergamous, the more successful they become, the fewer and fewer men they find themselves being attracted to. So they eventually reach a point. If a woman's a billionaire, then pretty much, she's got no options, basically. Because most billionaire men are not going to want her because she don't need them. So she's going to have to go against her instincts and, look for a guy who doesn't make a fraction of what she makes. And so it's going to be a very weird relationship, and she's going to attract a particular type of guy, Internet Tough Guy says some dominatrix thing. Yeah, something like that. It's going to be a weird dynamic. Ireland Grill says, Hatman, would you ever get with a gal from yard? No. Is the short answer. No. Some people like that short answer there. Internet Tough Guy says, what you saying? What you saying? It no make it. A yard girl. I mean, you might be able to find one from country that goes to church. And I'm talking about proper country, some village out in the bush in Jamaica. And she's never lived outside of that. And she's like proper, simple and humble and all that kind of business. But those types of girls are few and far between. In fact, even in country in Jamaica, the girls are getting ratchet now. So, short answer is no. Shout out to Ayed, big up, big up. Grind says, Hatman, what are your thoughts on interracial relationships? As an African, my family tend to look down on those who have one. What is my take on them? Well, I've never had one. I've only ever dated black girls my whole life. But it's an awkward one because there are problems that come with interracial relationships. In terms of the cohesion between the two different sides of the family, and then the kids get caught between it, you know, mixed race kids and whatever, they get caught between tension between the families sometimes and tension between the races. So ideally you wouldn't want to put your kids in that position, but at the same time, in the black community, for example, there's a lot of guys who just are not popular with black women. So what are those guys supposed to do? Are they supposed to just go through their whole lives, never been able to find someone and being alone and miserable? So when those kind of guys end up dating girls of other races, how can you blame them? Because they're not wanted by their own. I'm not saying in all that's the only reason why guys date outside the race, yeah, but there are certainly a lot of guys who do it for that reason, because their own don't really want them. So how can you blame them for going where they are wanted? You see what I'm saying? So it's not something I do personally, but you know, I'm not judging the next person. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, Triple R says, Jamaican girls have a reputation for winding on random guys. African girls don't move as mad. Yeah, for the most part, they don't. I mean, the last time I went to Notting Hill Carnival, I went there with my girlfriend at the time, who's African. And we're walking through Carnival now, and a Jamaican girl comes up to my girl, and she was like, your man is just hot, and she was saying all this stuff about me. Do you mind if I dance with him? This is how these yard girls are. They're bold as anything. She literally came up to my girlfriend and said, can I whine on your man? and my African girlfriend was so shook of this yard girl. She like looked at me. She didn't even know what to say. And I was like, nah, we're not doing that. I had to refuse it. You get me? Because my girlfriend was so scared of the yardie girl that I had to actually do the talking. Yeah. Evil Uncle Phil says African women do now. Oh, in the UK, in the West, but in Africa, not so much. Unless you go to like South Africa or Kenya or something. Black Dynamite said at least she asked. Well, yeah, but it's still a bold thing to do, you know? There you go. That's yard gal. Arco says, ask a girl if you could whine on her man is insane. Yeah, it was mad bold. I was like, what is this? Shola says, the only Jamaican girls I've been with cook hard. Yeah, Jamaican girls can cook. The ones who are born in Jamaica, I mean, they can cook like a MFer. They can really cook. And even in my generation anyway, even the Jamaican girls that are born in the UK, most of them could cook. There's a few who couldn't, but most of them could. That I dealt with anyway, they could. But the ones who are born in yard, yeah, they cook up a storm. They'll cook up a storm. That's one thing you will get is good food and fed well. But Is it worth all the drama that comes with it? And long ass fingernails. Like, what is it with Jamaican women and them disgusting raptor claws that it's awful, man. I don't know why that is seen as attractive by anyone. Long ass raptor claws, awful. Evil Uncle Phil says, women do that though. When they see you with another woman, that's when they find you most attractive. Yeah. See, this is the thing about women, is that they're not logical. You know, their feelings don't correlate with their thoughts in their mind, their rational thoughts. So, for example, women will say things like, I want a man who's loyal. Yeah, I want a man who's loyal. But the types of men who tend to be loyal are the men with not many options. It's like Chris Rock once said in a stand-up, a man is only as loyal, is only as faithful as his options. So the loyal man is the one who doesn't have a lot of options. But a woman doesn't like him. Why? Because he's not popular with other women. Women often want to be, they want their choice in men to be validated by other women. And they don't see the danger in that. Of having a man that is wanted by loads of other women. You think he's going to be loyal? Are you mad? So I'm saying, they don't make logical choices. You see, as men, we tend to want something which is quite difficult to get to, but we tend to want a woman who's attractive to us, who doesn't get a load of male attention. To us, that's perfect. She's flying under the radar. She doesn't have loads of followers on Instagram. You know, guys are not hollering at her that much. Perfect. She's flying under the radar. But a woman doesn't want that kind of guy. She wants a guy who's getting loads of female attention. I'm not saying all women, but a lot of women, right? Maybe the majority. They want a guy who's getting loads of female attention. It validates her choice. It makes her feel, it reminds her, oh yeah, I do have someone that's valuable. If a guy gets no attention and he is giving her all his attention and he's not getting attention from other girls, she's going to be like, this guy's boring. So they're so self-destructive and they can't seem to figure out that it's their own nature that makes them so. You know, I was watching a live stream maybe a year ago or so, and the topic of the live stream was, does the side piece make it better? And basically, the gist of it, of what the host was saying is, does having a side chick make your main relationship with your main chick better? Because you're not putting all your focus on your main chick. Because when you do that with a girl, when you put all your focus on a girl, that will often make her turn off. Yeah, that will often turn her off if you put all your focus on her. Whereas if your focus is split between her and another girl, or her and a next couple of girls, she's more likely to desire you. Again, women say they want monogamy, but in practice, it's as if they don't. It's weird. I don't think they really realize. Seriously, I don't think women really know what they truly want. And that is why men have to be leaders. Because when women are left to their own devices, look at me sounding like the ultimate misogynist. I'm just telling you through my experience what it seems to be. They don't know how to lead. They're just going to lead themselves down a path of self-destruction. There needs to be a man there who they can follow. I'm not saying all women, but the majority of them, in my experience, that's how they are. Black Dynamite says, nothing makes a woman behave more than some new cat. There you go. KS says, that's why in Islam a man gets 4 women. Yeah, a man gets 4 and women get 1. Yeah, part of the reason. Another part of the reason is to try and control male promiscuity. Because men, of course, do a lot of damage in society. Running around, you know, breeding up a bunch of different women and not claiming kids. This is obviously a very damaging thing. So in Islam, they have a system where it's like, okay, we're going to crack down hard on infidelity. All right. And, you know, the way Islam is supposed to be practiced, when it's strictly practiced, men are not supposed to cheat. But in order to accommodate the promiscuous male nature, they say, okay, you can have up to 4 wives. Yeah. To try and accommodate that part of male nature. Because if you don't do that, then men are going to go against, they're going to start fornicating and whatnot. So they're trying to, again, cater to the promiscuous male nature and also prevent fornication at the same time. So they've put a limit of 4 wives on it. So, yeah. In nature, certainly with mammals, for the most part, the male is more promiscuous than the female because, of course, the male can impregnate multiple females in a very short space of time, and that will help to perpetuate the species. Females can only get pregnant, you know, well, I guess with some mammals, they can give birth to a litter, right? Multiple offspring, but once they're pregnant, they can't get pregnant again. You know, they can't have multiple pregnancies at the same time. But the male of the species can impregnate dozens of females all over the place and increase the population in a short space of time, right? So this is why males tend to be instinctively more promiscuous, even male humans. But obviously we can't go around acting like animals and acting on our animal instincts all the time. You need to cater to some extent for the animal instincts, but also control them so that we don't live like animals and, you know, become completely savage. Black Dynamite says the promiscuity in certain parts of the Caribbean is insane and you can see their society breaking down because of it. Yeah, I saw some stat that was, in fact, before I finish that thought, Tony has made a great point here. He says, a man who doesn't get attention from other women is like them walking past a restaurant that has no customers. They ain't going to go in and they ain't going to go in and think something's wrong. Yeah, exactly like that. That's the way women see a man who doesn't get female attention. It's like you walking past the restaurant and no one's in there. Imagine you walking down the street, loads of restaurants on there. Some of them are packed with people and you walk past one and no one's in there. You're not going to go in there because you're thinking, well, it can't be any good. That's how women are with men. That's how they are. But they can't see how that doesn't line up with a monogamous man. The more attention a man gets, the more likely he's going to cheat. It's just that simple. So if monogamy means that much to you as a woman, you're going to have to bite the bullet and go for the empty restaurant. It's just, you know, and even the empty restaurant, there's no guarantee you won't cheat. But if you want the highest chances of a faithful man, you got to take the empty restaurant. Simple. You got to bite that bullet. Take the empty restaurant. Exactly, Tony. If the restaurant is packed, women are going to think, yeah, what's going on in there? I want to go in. Exactly like that. You know, like little kids, when those of you who have got younger siblings or maybe you've got children of your own, you'll know what I'm talking about. Let's say one of the kids, you take them to a toy shop and you try to give them a toy, or maybe even I don't know, a biscuit or some type of food or anything. You offer it to them and they're like, no, I don't want it. But then their sibling takes it and then all of a sudden they want that thing. Their sibling takes it, likes it and is having fun or whatever. And then all of a sudden, no, I want it. Hang on, I already offered it to you. Yeah, this is what women are like with men. And in fact, one of the things you'll often hear women say is that they're the type of person who, when you're ordering a meal and you ask her what she wants, do you want chips? She'll be like, no. When you get them, she'll start eating them off your plate. You know, like that. So women in general tend to be that way when it comes to men. They have to have the man validated by other women in order to be attracted to him or continue to be attracted to him. Bexy says, Hatman, have you ever had a female stalker or bunny boiler? Yes. I'm even hesitant to talk about the female stalker I had, in case she's still hanging around. I'm not even joking. I actually hesitant to talk about her. There's been a couple of female stalkers I had since I've been on YouTube. The last one was really bad. Really, really bad. And yeah, I'm not even gonna elaborate. I'm not even gonna elaborate, bro, because that was wild. You know, that situation went badly left. And she stalked me for best part of a year. So, yeah, I'm not even going to elaborate too much on that. I'll talk about it on Patreon more. But publicly, I don't even want to talk about it too much because it was so wild. And she was Jamaican. Not born in Jamaica, but like Jamaican parents. Goozy says, couldn't take the boxing knowledge. Black Dynamite says, Hatman, have you heard of telegony? It's when a woman gives birth to a child who is genetically yours, but he has the traits of her former lovers. Yeah, well, there was a story that came out in the media some years ago, which claimed that there's evidence that when women have unprotected intercourse with a man, the DNA from the guy's fluid can actually cross the blood-brain barrier of the female and end up in her brain. So she can actually end up with the DNA of her previous sexual partners that she had unprotected sex with in her brain permanently. And they were speculating as to what kind of effect this can have on the woman. My experience is that promiscuous women tend to be crazy as hell. Yeah. The most promiscuous women that I've encountered, either that I've had dealings with myself or I've seen other people deal with, they tend to be absolutely crazy. Crazy look in their eyes, crazy, unbalanced behavior, and so on. Does that have anything to do with what I was just, talking about? Telegony? Who knows? But I can tell you that promiscuous women tend to be really crazy and unhinged. And also, again, in my experience, promiscuous women tend to develop psychopathic traits, a lot of them. I can't say that they are out and out psychopaths, but a lot of them develop like psychopathic traits when they're really promiscuous. They become like really devious and cold-hearted and conniving and backstabbing. All that kind of stuff tends to come with really promiscuous women, like really dark psychology a lot of them have. Evil Uncle Phil says, crazy but professional in the bedroom. Damn straight. Eh? Curious says, was she Jamaican, Ukraine? Yeah, she was Jamaican. Jamaican parents. And she was as crazy as a box of frogs. The last stalker I had. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to invoke that demon, do you know what I mean, by talking about her that much. Because that was just, yeah. It was at the level where I was like, restraining orders were going to have to get involved. That's how deep it was. So I don't even want to invoke that shit. That ish. God, I nearly provoked the algorithm there. I don't want to invoke that ish. Wave says, did you meet her in person? Yeah, we had she was like a link, you know? A casual relationship, I guess they would call today. We used to call them links back in the days. A casual relationship. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about when it was and all that stuff because, like I said, I don't want to invoke. I don't know if that person, if they're watching, God forbid. God forbid. God forbid. I was so glad when that whole situation came to an end. Wave says, how come UFC don't create any stars anymore? It seems like the UFC name is bigger than any fighter. Why is it like that? That's the way they designed it. They designed it so that the UFC name is bigger than the fighters, so that they make all the money through their merchandise, not the fighters through their own merchandise, the UFC brand. But yeah, I think UFC has taken a hit since Turki Al-Sheikh started investing all this money in boxing and making all the big fights that people want to see. KS says, Hatman, do you or anyone you know have experience with steroids for muscle growth? Me, I've never even taken creatine. I've never taken any training supplements in my life. But yes, I've known many people that have taken steroids over the years. Many people. When I worked as a bouncer, loaded up. Other bouncers were on roids, growth hormones, HGH and all that stuff. And in my element group, there's a couple of people in there that have taken roids. And they can tell you all about it. But I've got no experience with it myself, no. Just been around people that have been on roids and HGH and, like when I was a bouncer, there were people who were injecting roids. There were people who, I think one guy was taking some type of growth hormone. Was it testosterone or HGH or something? And it was a spray that he would spray under his tongue. So, I don't know what that's all about, but he had this spray thing that he'd spray under his tongue. Those of you who have knowledge of these things, maybe you can, expand on whatever that product was that he used to spray. I think it was HGH. He used to spray it under his tongue. Shade says, have you ever had a pregnancy scare with a woman? No, never a pregnancy scare. But, there's been a few times the day after when I'm like, I reckon just to be on the safe side, I'm going to take you down to the pharmacy. I'm going to get one of those little morning after pills, just to be on the safe side. Yeah, the roids in the nightclub scene with bouncers is obviously off the scale. Loads of them are taking roids. In fact, it's probably even more of a thing now than it was back then. Because I think roids, my perception anyway, is in the UK, roids are more popular now among the general public than they ever were back in the early 2000s, 90s. So I have to imagine that, yeah, the number of bouncers taking them is even higher now than when I was a bouncer. Goozy says roids are worse now, cheap imports from China and India. I guess you mean worse, what, for your health, or worse in their effectiveness, or do you just mean more common now? Arco says the guy you said who wore the jacket and ripped it by flexing. Yeah. That was the guy who left his jacket in the club and wasn't allowed back in. And it was an expensive jacket, like several £100 or whatever. And the a-hole of a bouncer who was on the door at the time wouldn't let the guy back in to find his jacket for whatever reason. Maybe the guy had been rude. I don't know what the reason was, but he wouldn't let the guy back in. And the guy was like really upset. He wasn't allowed back in to find his jacket. And the guy, the bouncer told him, yeah, come back the next day. Come back tomorrow. If it's here, it'll turn up. And so doors close. All the bouncers are gathering round and whatever, staying behind for a drink, which was customary at a lot of the venues I worked at. The bouncers would stay behind after and have a drink. I never would. But on this one occasion, I stayed around for maybe, 5-10 minutes, where everyone was talking and bantering about what had happened during the night. And that's when, one of the guys produced a jacket. Oh yeah, his jacket's right here. We just, for whatever reason, didn't let him come in and find a jacket. His jacket's right here. And so the guy who, and this was a normal sized guy, can't have been any more than 12 stone, 168, 175 pounds at most. The guy whose jacket it was. And then the bouncers who were all bantering about it, after the doors closed and, all the punters had left, he was huge. He was a big steroid, 17, 18 stone guy, banging the roids. And he put this little guy's jacket on and did an incredible Hulk flex in the jacket, and he just ripped it to shreds. Damn near ripped both sleeves off when he flexed them. And that's another thing as well. The roids will turn you, I'm not saying everybody, but in my experience, when I've been around people on roids who do roids a lot, it turns a lot of them into complete and utter anchors. They act like just absolute D-heads, do you know what I mean? Like idiots. And yeah, it turns their behavior terrible when they start banging the roids. It gives them an attitude problem. A lot of people wonder why bouncers have an attitude problem. Well, it's not just the roids, because, a lot of the punters have attitude problems, and then that gives you an attitude problem. You know what I mean? It puts you on edge. Because I was like that. I was on edge a lot when I was a bouncer, because back then, early 2000s, it was dangerous. There was a lot more shootings and stuff back then, bouncers getting shot and all kind of things, and people would threaten you and pull knives out, and it was dangerous back then. And when you're dealing with that kind of thing every day, it triggers, your fight or flight mechanism. And with me, it was the fight mechanism. So I just became hyper aggressive when I was doing that. That's one of the reasons I had to quit that job eventually, because I was just becoming too aggressive, because I always felt threatened. I always felt like I was under threat, and therefore, I got aggressive whenever I felt threatened. But when you combine that with roids, oh my God. It turns people, some bouncers, into just monumental morons and idiots. Shade says, how long were you a bouncer for? In total, I was probably a bouncer for like 4 or 5 years or something like that. Maybe 4 years, 5 years. Maybe closer to 4. Javo says, do you remember the case of James Oyabola? Yes, I do. It was a very sad thing. Hatman R says, Hatman, do you think the beef between Eddie Hearn and Eubank Jr. is fake? They did an interview a month back where they seemed friendly. I don't think it's necessarily a beef, I don't think it's necessarily a beef, because nothing has happened between Eubank Jr. and Eddie Hearn that's so bad to make them have a beef. I just think that Eubank Jr. just generally doesn't like Eddie Hearn's personality. And he thinks Eddie Hearn tries to make it all about himself, like with David Hay. Although David Haye was just bantering with Eddie Hearn, selling the fight. Eddie Hearn didn't realize it until David Haye phoned him later. But when David Haye, I think it was the press conference for the first Bellew fight, started ripping into Eddie Hearn, saying, "Oh, you try and always make it all about you. Adam Smith is supposed to be hosting this press conference, but no, you come along with apples and pears, you remember that." So Eubank Jr. basically did the same thing. He was basically saying, "No, Eddie, I'm not interested in what you've got to say. You're not going to dominate this press conference," etc., etc. And with Eubank Jr., is part of it salesmanship? Maybe. Part of it also because he just doesn't like Eddie Hearn's personality, probably. But I don't think there's real beef between them. They've never had any big business fallout where one person has sued the other for millions or whatever that could leave you with that type of grudge. So, then again, there was the whole PED issue with Conor Benn. Maybe he holds some kind of grudge with Eddie Hearn over that because Hearn tried to have that fight go ahead, but then Eubank knew. So he always had the choice. So, I don't think there's real beef personally. Black Dynamite says, is James Oyabola the kid who was bullied because he was a good student? No, you're thinking of Damilola Taylor. James Oyabola was a professional boxer, born in Nigeria, but he was based in the UK in Paddington in West London. He fought Lennox Lewis in the amateurs. In the pros, he was most well known for his rivalry with Scott Welch. They had 2 fights. And unfortunately, his life was cut short when he visited a friend's bar. I think the bar was in Fulham. Friend's bar in Fulham. And there was a couple of idiots in there. This was just after the smoking ban came into effect. And there was a couple of idiots in there who were smoking. And so his friend sent James, who was a massive guy, like 6'9", huge Nigerian guy. He sent James over to talk to these guys who were smoking, when they weren't allowed to smoke. And again, James had finished a shift somewhere else. And he went to his friend's bar to hang out or whatever. And his friend just asked him, can you tell those guys to stop smoking? He went over, told them to stop smoking. I guess they stopped and he thought nothing of it. But as the guys were leaving, one of them pulled out a gun and shot him in the head. Shot James Oyabola in the head. So, there are idiots and monumental scumbags out there who do stuff like that. Yeah, I remember the night when James Oyabola lost his life. I was actually working a night shift doing static security. I wasn't working on the doors. I was doing static security on a night shift. And I remember because, back then you just listened to the radio. This was before smartphones, or before smartphones were any good anyway. Did smartphones exist at the time? I think phones did have internet at that point, but it was very primitive. Take 5 minutes to load up one web page, that kind of thing. So I used to listen to the radio the whole night. And I remember just listening to the radio and they reported that Oyabola had been shot. Evil Uncle Phil says, did you ever do the doors with Whyte? No. Dillian Whyte is much younger than me. And, I did the doors in the early 2000s. So I must have quit that job in 2006, 2007, 6, somewhere around there. In the early 2000s was the last time I worked. I think maybe 2000s, was it even 2005? It's a long time ago. Maybe 2005, 6 was the last time I worked on the doors. So that was long before, Dillian Whyte. How old is Dillian Whyte now? Is he 36? So if he's 36 now, I think he's 36. In 2006, He would have been how old? 17 or something? No, 15. So he would have just arrived in the UK, because I think he arrived in the UK when he was 13 or 14, from Jamaica. And he didn't waste any time either. Dillian Whyte had his first child, I think, when he was 14. So he literally came straight off the boat from yard and started impregnating women right away. When he was only 14 years old. Incredible. Living up to the Jamaican stereotype, innit? Unbelievable. Man's 14, he only just literally arrived in the country and he's already impregnating. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Arco says snatching bodies from early. Shade says, yeah, he's literally one of the youngest parents ever if you research it up on Wikipedia. Well, males, yeah. There are females that have had kids younger than that. I mean, there were girls in my school who had kids younger than that. But for a male, yeah, that's a very young age. It's crazy. Having your first kid at 14. Chisora said recently, Dillian Whyte's son going to be making his debut. So how old would his son be now? In his 20s, right? His son be in his 20s. Wave says Ben Shalom is doing a 7-fight card of only women this week. Do you have any interest in it, Hatman? Natasha Jonas versus Lauren Price? That's obviously a rhetorical question. But I'm glad he's doing only women's cards because, again, female boxing shouldn't be something that you have to try and force down people's throats. Yeah? If people like it, then let it stand on its own 2 feet. Yeah? Don't use male boxing to prop it up. Do women's only cards. And then the market will decide whether it's commercially viable or not. And you can't have feminists trying to blame men for it because it's like, look, it's a card full of women's fights. 50% of the population are women, right? So tune in and watch it then. Don't look for men to support women's boxing. You are 50% of the population. Why the hell should we go out of our way to support what you're doing? We don't say, oh, more women need to watch men's boxing. No. We're not worried about more women watching men's boxing. So let women's boxing stand on its own 2 feet. If women want to complain, oh, it's not popular enough, well, you watch it then. And see, this is the thing about women's sport in general. Women don't even watch women's sport for the most part. It's like, why are you trying to complain to men that women are not watching women's sport when you don't even flipping watch it? It's unbelievable. This is what I say about female nature is so contradictory. It's like, what on earth are you talking about? I've had women sometimes turn up in the chat, in the comments of some of my videos saying, oh, you need to support women's boxing. Why? You're a woman, right? 50% of the population are women. You support it. Why are you worried about me having to support it for? Seriously. Exactly as KS says there. Even in football, women prefer men's football. They do. So why are you taking the issue up with men? Take the issue up with other women. Get other women to support women's sport. Yeah? Stop complaining to us. You shouldn't need us. You're 50% of the population. You should not need us to support your sports. Evil Uncle Phil says women don't watch sports in general, and that's somehow men's fault. Indeed, isn't it? Incredible. Everything's our fault. Unbelievable, man. It's like I'm sure there's men out there who, I don't know, specialize in knitting content or something, and men don't support the channel and it's a bunch of women on there watching it, it's like, well, it is what it is. I'm sure he's not complaining that he doesn't get enough male viewers for his knitting channel. Because he understands the reality of the situation. Most men are not going to be interested in knitting. Now, I'm really showing my age, right? Most women aren't interested in knitting today, but you know, in decades gone by, a lot of women were into knitting. You know, I grew up with my mom knitting, my grandmother's knitting. Do women knit now? Women don't knit anymore, do they? What do you reckon is the cutoff age below which women do not knit? Now, Tony says, I remember during the build-up to Whyte versus Fury, they were flirting with the idea of Baby Ting versus Shane Fury, but was shocked when Baby Ting said he has a son Shane's age. Yeah, I remember that. June Sports says 50. Okay, so you reckon 50 is the cutoff. Below the age of 50, women don't knit. Kyle says 35. Oh. As low as 35, yeah? So you reckon there's 35-year-old women that knit? Evil Uncle Phil says below 45. Grind 55. Okay. Shade says there's a few on TikTok that still do. Okay. But are they representative of, you know, what percentage of the population are they representative of? Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, do you agree that UFC collaboration can be unhealthy? Hang on, let me get the super chat up here. Yeah, do you agree that UFC collaboration can be unhealthy for boxing, more so than help it, especially with payment to fighters? Well, yeah, this is what I was talking about in the previous live stream. If they try and run this boxing league with Dana White and the WWE guy in Turkey the same way that they run UFC, then it's surely going to be bad for boxers. Maybe not bad for boxing as a sport in as far as getting the best to fight the best in the short term, but in the long term, when fighters realize they're getting paid far less in this league than they were getting paid in years gone by the Eddie Hearns and Frank Warrens of the world, then I think that they're just going to go elsewhere. I'm skeptical about whether they can put an entire sport as big as boxing under one umbrella in one league. I'm skeptical about that. Because there's always going to be an opportunity for a promoter outside of that ecosystem to say, I'm going to treat fighters better. We're going to do it like it was done in the old days. We're going to get with one of the other broadcasters, not DAZN, and we're going to pay you what the old promoters used to pay you outside of this league ecosystem. But yeah, Dana White has no scruples, and he's been underpaying UFC fighters for probably forever. Matt also says, it's kind of crazy that they're trying to implement the no easy fights model in boxing. Unlike UFC, boxers don't have longevity from damage. Yeah, that's a point that somebody else made as well, and it's a very good point. MMA fighters don't take the kind of brain damage that boxers take. So it's not as safe for boxers to be matched tough as often and from as early on in their careers as it is for MMA fighters. So it's a very good point. And Matt also says the problem is, unlike UFC fighters don't, yeah, exactly. They don't constantly get punched in the head against the best. There's wrestling, which prevents as much damage. Indeed. You know, leg kicks and all the other stuff. Yep. Boxing is far more dangerous in terms of brain damage than UFC is, for sure. And I hope Turkey, Dana White, and the other guy, Khan, are taking that into account, but I don't know whether they are. I don't think Dana White particularly cares, to be honest. I think Dana White's that ruthless. They probably won't care. Oh, wow. Malik says, shout out to the Hat Man. I seen a young girl about 24 years old on a New York City Bronx 4 train knitting a nice hat. Was she Oriental? What race was she, out of curiosity? Because I feel like If it was like a Chinese girl or an, Korean or Japanese, I reckon they're more likely to do something like that, or maybe I'm tripping. But why do I feel like a Chinese girl in her 20s might be knitting on a train? Oh, she was black. Okay. Maybe she was country and just moved up to New York. I'm surprised by that. I'm very surprised. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, if you were to make a preordained assessment on what style type of fighter would be best in a UFC like boxing environment, who would you pick? Probably Floyd Mayweather. Yeah, a guy who, in terms of long term, he'd be taking the least damage because he's so defensive. So probably a Floyd Mayweather, Andre Ward, those kind of guys that have longevity. They maybe wouldn't be fan favorites, but they would get the wins and they would preserve their brain cells. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. Malik says, yup. Yup, as in what? She was country? From one of them small towns or villages down in Alabama somewhere. Kyle says it's still a thing in the East and in some parts of Africa. Yeah, for sure. That's what I was thinking, like Chinese, I could imagine a Chinese girl doing that. Matt says, I mean more in terms of like USA style, Eastern style, etc. Well, the slick defensive style is more of a USA thing. So I would probably say the USA style might do better. Because you don't get that many defensive wizards coming out of the UK. Let's be real. The best defensive UK fighter right now is probably Jack Catterall. Other than Jack Catterall, what UK fighter really has a great defense? I can't think of one off the top of my head. Kyle says Harold Graham had a good defense. Yeah, his defense was pretty good. It was pretty good. He was elusive and awkward and stuff like that. Yeah, so he had a pretty good defense. Definitely wasn't elite because he obviously lost a few times and he got chinned by Julian Jackson and whatnot. But he had a better defense than most. But generally, the UK has not been a hotbed of great defensive fighters. Truth be told, it has not been. I mean, Jack Catterall might actually be one of the best defensive fighters the UK's ever had. Malik says, nah, she was definitely born and raised in New York. I just don't know which borough, though. Okay, well, was she fat? She wasn't hot. I can't imagine a hot black chick in her 20s riding a train knitting. No. I reckon she was like a big fat girl. Big fat girl who probably still lives with her mother or a grandmother. A homebody, For her to be knitting, she must be some kind of homebody. Arco says, why do you think that is, Hatman? Strange when you point it out, actually. I guess you mean in relation to why the UK doesn't produce a lot of great defensive fighters. I think one of the reasons that the UK historically hasn't produced great defensive fighters is because the sparring in UK gyms isn't as tough generally as the sparring in American gyms. And so the sparring in American gyms is so tough that it almost forces you to tighten up your defense. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in the UK, it's like the sparring is a little soft at times compared to like American sparring. And then when they get in the ring for a real fight and people aren't holding back and they're trying to do serious damage, their defensive skills are not as sharpened as much as they should be. So I think that's part of the reason. And also, there is a defensive style taught by, which was developed really by, or at least popularized by African-American fighters. And so many of the old African-American trainers would teach that style, what became known as Philly shell, whatever, but there's so much debate over where that style comes from. They say it doesn't come from Philadelphia at all. It comes from like Michigan or whatever. Anyway, from way back in the Archie Moore days, his defensive techniques and so on, up through the 90s with James Toney and, later on with Floyd Mayweather. So there's a particular slick style which has become synonymous with Black American fighters. And they are the people that, I don't want to say they invented it because they might not have invented it, but they certainly popularized it and developed it. And so they're the best at teaching it. So, and in fact, Jack Catterall, of course, sparred in the Mayweather gym. Yeah, he's the UK fighter with the great defense. Well, yeah, he spent a lot of time in the Mayweather gym sparring there. Damn, I'm all the way wrong about this girl knitting on the train. Damn. Nah, she was slim, pretty, and about 5'8", 120 pounds. She just looks more on the quiet side for whatever reason. Okay. She's an anomaly. She's a needle in a haystack. The Island Grill says, do you think that's why the UK has less punch-drunk sounding fighters? Because of less hard sparring? Yeah, I suspect it is. Because, in some of those American gyms, the sparring is so tough, people do get damaged in the gym. I mean, people were critical of Manny Stewart for that reason. They said that the stuff that used to go on in the crunk was so brutal, the sparring sessions were so brutal, that a lot of fighters got punch-drunk from the sparring and their pro careers never took off. Their pro careers went down the toilet basically because they got ruined in the gym. But it's like Sparta, It is brutal in some of them American gyms, but it's the process that you have to go through as a boxing system. It's the process you have to have in order to produce those type of, defensively gifted fighters. That defense has to be getting tested to an extreme extent on a regular basis. And from that melting pot, you're going to get the exceptional defensive fighters that come out of it, like Mayweather, like Pernell Whitaker, so on and so forth. Yeah, because it's going to go one of two ways. Evil Uncle Phil says that's what happened to Dillian Whyte. He sparred too hard and his punch resistance went. And yeah, it will go one of two ways. When you're involved in that kind of hard sparring, you're either going to get completely damaged and destroyed, or you're going to develop incredible defensive skills. It's going to go one of two ways. Or very good defensive skills at the least. Unless you've got a really tough brain. And I think some people do have tough brains. It's like you look at George Foreman. George Foreman took tremendous punishment in many fights in his career. And yet, he was the only one of those fighters from the 70s heavyweight era that even in his 70s now, is George Foreman in his 70s or is he in his 80s now? But he's still completely coherent. No pugilistic dementia, no punch drunk syndrome, nothing. He talks just as well now as he did 20, 30, 40 years ago. But you look at his contemporaries, Joe Frazier was punch drunk. Muhammad Ali obviously got Parkinson's. Ken Norton was punch drunk. Yet somehow here we got George Foreman, who took plenty of punishment, even when he was an old man. He took plenty of punishment. in the Tommy Morrison fight, in the Holyfield fight, in the Michael Moorer fight, in the Alex Stewart fight. He took loads of punishment as an old man. And somehow this guy, no effect. So some people, I think, actually have tough brains. You know, tougher brains than other people, not just tougher skulls or whatever the case may be, but maybe their actual brain is tougher and can take more of a beating inside the skull. Because Foreman is as fresh as a daisy in his 70s. His speech is perfect. Evil Uncle Phil says Whyte talks from the side of his mouth. Yeah, that's a Jamaican thing, though. I don't know why Jamaicans do that, but a lot of Jamaicans, especially from the older generations, they'll talk out the side of their mouth. I don't know what that's about, but many of them were like that. They would talk out the side of their mouth. I'm waiting for the Jamaicans to turn up in the chat and defend it. Yo, it's the facts. Jamaicans have a lot of funny, amusing idiosyncrasies, you know? Shout out to someone for the super chat. He says, just caught your last live. I think Joyce will dominate Hrgovic. In my opinion, the WSB fight was not close despite the scores, and Hrgovic's stamina isn't good. I mean, you might be right. At the very least, Hrgovic needs to be in great shape to be beating Joe Joyce. Maybe Joyce stylistically does have his number, but it also depends on what Joyce has left. Because there's a lot of people who disagree with me and they think that Joyce is punch drunk. They think Joyce has shown significant deterioration in his speech, maybe in his motor skills. So, you know, if they're both as fresh as each other, and obviously Hrgovic is taking this fight on relatively short notice, about a month out, then maybe it does favor Joyce stylistically, based upon their WSB fight, where Joyce did impose himself on Hrgovic and kind of outworked him. But maybe Joyce is diminished enough. Maybe Hrgovic has improved enough to have a different result this time. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Fight Sport Talk says, I'm picking Benavidez to beat Bivol in a tough fight. What do you think? I think that it's going to be a very competitive fight. And I think we are in the minority. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Benavidez beat Bivol. I edge towards Bivol, personally myself, if I'm going to pick a winner. I edge towards Bivol, but I think it's going to be very competitive. But yeah, we are in the minority, those of us who think that Benavidez has got a real good chance of winning. Because the vast majority, from what I've seen doing previous live streams, seem to think that Bivol's going to wash Benavidez. It won't even be that competitive. But I feel very different. I think Benavidez is going to give him all he can handle. Shout out to Internet Tough Guy. If you guys can all stick a like on this stream, it will be very much appreciated. Thank you in advance. It really helps with visibility. Haven't even mentioned it, and I've been talking for how long now? Was it 3 hours? How long have I been doing this stream for? Malik says, damn near all the Jamaicans from Flatbush, Brooklyn, talk with their mouth on the side, even the women. See that? There you go. It's a Jamaican thing. I don't know why they do it, but it's a weird Jamaican idiosyncrasy of talking out the side of their mouth. It's a very weird and amusing thing. And Jamaicans are unintentionally funny anyway. Yeah, have you ever been around Jamaicans, especially like Yardies, people are born and raised in Jamaica? They'll have you cracking up unintentionally all the time. Just the way they pronounce words and their mannerisms and stuff like that. They're just funny as hell without even meaning to be. And their names are funny. They always give each other and give people that they know the funniest nicknames. Evil Uncle Phil says this version of Joyce is out of shape and much slower. Yeah, he's definitely a lot slower than he was in the amateurs, for sure. Fight Sport Talk says, long live, bro. Yeah. It's definitely been a long live. It's weird. In the YouTube studio, it doesn't actually tell me how long the live has been going on for. I have to go into OBS for it to actually tell me how long it's been. 3 hours, 17 minutes nearly. But for some reason, you would think in YouTube Studio it would have that, metric right there. But it doesn't. It doesn't tell you how long you've been streaming for, which is weird. Fight Sport Talk says, I really hope Parker fights Caballero even though Dubois punked out. I'd like to see it, but I'm not sure what's in it for Parker. Obviously, it's a credible fight because of the run that both guys are on. But if Parker has got the option of fighting, let's say, the winner of Joyce and Hrgovic, particularly if Joyce wins, because he gets the opportunity to get revenge, or if he has the option to fight Anthony Joshua even, he would surely choose one of those options rather than fighting Caballero, because both are credible fights, but they'd presumably be for a lot more money. And maybe Parker just sits it out and waits for his shot and doesn't fight anyone dangerous up until then. You couldn't blame him because he's fought plenty of dangerous people up to this point to get to this position. So I wouldn't have any issue with Parker sitting it out. Fight Sport Talk says, what version of OBS did you download for your MacBook? I don't know the exact version as in... Oh, hang on. Does it say here? OBS 31.0.1. So this is OBS... Because I know there's like different versions of OBS. I guess that's what you mean, as in OBS Studio. There's like a simplified version and there's a more complicated version. I forget which one is which at times. But I'm using the more complicated version of OBS. Because there's another version which is like a simplified one. This is the more complicated one. So whichever one that is, that's the one I'm using. Wave says, do these lives go quick for you, Hatman? And do you enjoy it more than making videos? I do enjoy doing the lives more than the videos, yeah. But sometimes when I want to, talk about a specific topic, I would prefer it to be concise rather than be meandering and looking at the chat and all that kind of thing. Because for new viewers, dedicated videos tend to do better views than live streams do. So if I really have a point I want to make and I want to make it concise and make it clear, then I prefer to do it in a video rather than doing it on a live. But with videos, you got to do all the editing and so on and so forth, which is tedious. For that reason, I much prefer lives because I could just flow and yeah. Black Dynamite says, Hatman, did you ever go through a Blue Yeti microphone phase? I had a Blue Yeti for about less than a week. Yeah. I had a Blue Yeti for less than a week and I took it back. Didn't like it at all. Far too sensitive. For one, it's massive, the Blue Yeti. The original one, and it was a huge microphone. And it was just way too sensitive. It didn't come with a shock mount. How can a microphone with such extreme sensitivity not come with a shock mount? That's probably the most sensitive mic, or one of the most sensitive mics I've ever used. It would pick up any kind of rumble or vibration and it would come through loudly in the recording. So, yeah, I got rid of that Blue Yeti in less than a week. Shout out to Fight Sport Talk for the super chat. He said, would you say Bivol is close to being a top 5 light heavyweight up there with Bob Foster, Spinks, Charles? Salute as always, bro, and big up to you as well. Is he close to that? In terms of light heavyweight achievements, I reckon he is. Yeah. But obviously those guys went on to have success in other weight classes. You know, Bob Foster didn't really have great success when he stepped up to heavyweight, to be fair. But obviously Michael Spinks did. Ezra Charles did. So, yeah, but, you know, Bob Foster had an incredible record as a puncher, knockout artist at 175 pounds, which you'd probably have to say was more impressive than what Bivol has done. But then, I don't know, you know, you take the weight thing into account as well. Bivol is bigger, perhaps, than somebody like Bob Foster. Because back then, guys used to weigh in on the day of the fight. So they weigh in at 175 pounds. They're not going to rehydrate any more than 6-7 pounds maybe after the weigh-in. So they were a lot smaller than the light heavyweights today. I don't know how big Bivol is, to be fair. Maybe he's not that big as a light heavyweight. But yeah, I reckon he's not too far off those guys for his light heavyweight resume. For sure. I think he's in the conversation. But yeah, them fighters, certainly Spinks and Charles, they went up and had success at heavyweight too, which I do not anticipate Bivol doing because the heavyweights of today are just too big. When Spinks went up to heavyweight and fought Larry Holmes I don't think was any more than 220 pounds. And Ezra Charles, again, he was in an era when the heavyweights were small compared to today. Anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap this one up here. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me. It's been a very enjoyable chat. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. Special shout out to everybody who donated via Super Chat. Take care of yourselves. Be good. And I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out.